Good evening and welcome to the March 17th, 2021 public meeting of the Board of Education. I am the board president, Melissa Ellis. This meeting is being televised live on AACPS TV and streamed live on AACPS's YouTube channel. If we are interrupted during the broadcast of this evening's meeting, the meeting will be stopped and we will take a short recess until we can continue. If for some reason we cannot continue, we will notify you as soon as possible when a new meeting will be scheduled. The board attorney has asked that I read the following statement. The Maryland Open Meetings Act, a state law, requires public meetings to be open to the public and to be held in places reasonably accessible to individuals who would like to attend these meetings. The limited public format of this meeting of the Board of Education is due to the COVID-19 emergency and is necessary in light of the serious health risks associated with public gatherings, as well as the governor's and county executives' various executive orders limiting public gatherings. Consistent with the Open Meetings Act, steps have been taken to ensure that this meeting includes an alternate accessibility feature that the Open Meetings Act Compliance Board and the courts have reviewed and approved, such as broadcasting the meeting with video and audio on cable TV and on the web, and allowing written public comments to agenda items to be filed with the board office and considered by the board. The board attorney has opined that the modified public access provided by this technology makes this virtual meeting reasonably accessible to the public and provides appropriate opportunity to observe the conduct of the board's public business consistent with prevailing best practices during this emergency situation, and therefore complies with the Open Meetings Act. As the legal and health parameters evolve, as reopening measures are implemented, this board will continue to review and revise our meeting procedures to balance our public business obligations with best safety practices. Please pause for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. O God, we pray to administer that which is just in all educational policies, being ever mindful of your guidance, stir us to action with love, wisdom, and understanding. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now I will conduct a roll call of members present in this evening's meeting. Ms. Frank. Dr. Tobin.
Here.
Ms. Corkadell. Ms. Antwine. Mr. Silkworth.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Schalheim.
Here.
Okay. And next we will cover item 2.03, approval of the minutes.
I move to adopt.
Go ahead a second. Any discussion? Do I have consensus to approve the minutes? No dissent? Okay, great. Next we have item 2.04, establishing agenda order. Do I have any comment, motion? Would anyone like to move to adopt the agenda order?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have consensus to adopt the agenda order? No dissent? All right. Next, we have item 2.05, recognitions. Don't believe we have any this evening. And now we are at item 2.06, the CRAST report.
Good evening, President Ellis, Vice President Schalheim, members of the board, and Dr. Arlotto. My name is Beckett Hummer. I'm a sophomore at Meade High School, and I'm proud to serve as the CRAST Secretary of Education. Next weekend, AACPS will send 52 students, the largest delegation in the state, attending the virtual Maryland Association of Student Councils virtual convention. Our delegates will attend workshops led by other student leaders from around the state and elect the MASC 2021-22 officers, We are excited to have Indu Bodala from Glen Burnie High School, Alina Malik from South River High, Katie Lewis from Southern High, and Abrusa Malik also from South River as workshop presenters this year. In addition, 2 AACPS students are running for MASC officer positions. Justin Paleska from Meade High School is running for MASC president, and Caroline Finn from South River High is running for MASC treasurer. Best of luck to these candidates. Krask would also like to offer special congratulations to Lindale Middle School for receiving the Felix Simon Middle School Award for Leadership and Service. This MASC award allows student council officers, members, and their advisors to evaluate their council against a shared set of standards and create an opportunity for student councils to be recognized for their effectiveness. The last AACPS middle school to receive this award was Chesapeake Bay Middle School in 2011. Way to go, Lindale Middle SGA and Miss Leah Noriega and Miss Sherry Endo. Krask is hosting the second student member of the board campaign clinic tonight at 6 p.m. Nominations for SMOB are due by this Friday, March 19th by 4 p.m. Applications by March 26th at 4 p.m. For more information and to access the Google Meet link, go to acps.org/SMOB. Members of the Krask General Assembly are currently voting on revisions to the Krask Constitution after a year of deliberation and debate. We are tallying final votes and expect the count to be final by the end of this week. On March 10th, the Let's Talk Justice team hosted over 40 students for the general meeting to have a continuation of last month's discussion on mental health. We were joined by special guest Ms. Tamika Perkins and Corporal Levere from the Anne Arundel County Police Department. Each Tuesday in March, Kindness Grows Here, Anne Arundel County Public Libraries, South River High, Crofton High School, and Arundel High School have hosted a book study surrounding the book Stamped by Ibram X. Kendi and Jason Reynolds. All community members, students, and educators were invited to come and discuss social justice history in America. Almost 100 community members attend each session, as the goal of this book study is to better understand Black and BIPOC history and understand how we can improve ourselves and become anti-racist. We are incredibly proud of the student leaders who facilitate these conversations. The student service leadership team hosted a general session today at 2 p.m. and introduced our new service project, Environmental-Based Bingo Board, where it's supposed to introduce students to a wide variety of service projects that deal with a certain aspect of the environment. They're hoping many students will participate, as this project is not only very fun, but engaging and a great way to earn service hours. The Krask Service and Wellness Committee members are teaming up to host the Wellness Buddies initiative, in which students may sign up to create a mental health kit for another student somewhere in the county. This kit may include items such as affirmation notes, calming playlist ideas, candles, journals, and more. The price limit is $10, but students can also make the kit completely themselves. To sign up, students can go to the Service Learning Portal, and information will also be posted to the Krask social media accounts. For a full calendar of events for Krask and Let's Talk Justice, please visit the respective web pages. Krask is excited to see some of our peers returning back into the physical classroom as hybrid learning starts. We would like to extend another huge thank you to teachers and AACPS staff for the work and planning that has gone into this transition. It is definitely not an easy task. Krask would also like to thank Dr. Arlotto for his continuous efforts towards the best interest of our students. We appreciate all the hard work he has put into this transition, as well as always being willing to meet with us and hear directly from the students. We'd like to remind everyone to go follow the proper guidelines set in place to keep us all protected. It's going to take all hands on deck. Wash your hands, wear a mask, and watch your distance. And thank you for all who listen. Stay safe, AACPS.
Thank you, Ms. Summer. And next we have the PTA report.
Hello. Good evening, President Ellis, VP Schellheim, Dr. Arlotto, and board members. My name is Mallory LaFon, and I represent Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs. A couple updates. At our February meeting, we were able to officially vote in our County Council Executive Committee. We also voted for a new PIAC rep, Tamara Beeger. Congrats to all of our newly elected officers. Every year, AACCPTA awards two $1,000 scholarships to high school seniors within Anne Arundel County. The 2020-2021 scholarship application has been extended to March 26, 2021. Please encourage high school seniors to apply. Applications have been sent to all high school guidance counselors and can be found online at www.aaccpta.org. We are in need of volunteers to help coordinate our virtual Founders Day celebration. If interested in joining this committee, please reach out to us at info@aaccpta.org. Nomination packets will soon be sent to all local units and schools to nominate outstanding volunteers and PTAs for awards this spring. Now that the coming year's budget is in the hands of County Exec Pittman, we are asking for all units and members to contact Pittman's office along with their respective county council members to ensure the AACPS budget is fully funded as recommended. At our last meeting, we voted to support 3 different measures. First, we support tax work to rule action and the goal to get teachers in the building and out of the building as quickly as possible. Local units are ready and willing to help schools, teachers, and building staff in any way possible. Second, with regard to item 5.07 on the Board of Education agenda tonight, National PTA has a position to support healthy school start and dismissal times. The AACCPTA supports actions by the Board of Education to implement these healthy school start and stop times. Lastly, AACCPTA supports changing the name of George Fox Middle School. We support this change because the current name does not speak to the core values of the Anne Arundel County Public Schools. This name change is a step in the right direction in the county's goal of all means all. I would like to extend a personal thank you to all of the teachers, admin, and building staff. We know that this transition into hybrid learning has been difficult, but seeing the happy students back in the classrooms is a sign of normalcy we've all been waiting for. Also, thank you to Dr. Arlotto and the Reopening Steering Committee for your hours and hours of hard work and planning to make this all a reality. Finally, please join your local PTA. Our local units are working hard to provide meaningful and enriching programs and activities in our schools during this difficult time. In order to continue to provide such support, PTAs need help from you. You can find information about local units on our website at www.aaccpta.org. Thank you.
Thank you for your update. And next, item 2.08, the CAC report.
Good evening, President Ellis, Vice President Schellheim, fellow board members, and Dr. Arlotto. My name is Tanisha Howard, Chair of the CAC, and on behalf of the CAC body, I am pleased to update the board on our activities. The CAC held its regular meeting of the 2020-2021 school year virtually on February 11th. Due to completions from several subcommittees, the Monday, March 8th was set as a virtual informal meeting for leadership planning and for remaining open subcommittees, which were the hate and bias, emergency plans, pandemic response, and the newly created student attire and appearance to plan next actions or finalize work areas or interim reports. We would like to thank board member Corinne Frank for joining. We are pleased to report these subcommittee updates to the board tonight. Board policy areas, student and gender identity. Completed their follow-up work and submitted their final report for consideration to the board policy committee on March 1st. Emergency plans, pandemic response. The team is continuing to compile their data to include recent guidance from FEMA, CDC, and other pertinent agencies. They are also now researching jurisdictions for lessons learned for current or prior pandemic experiences. Student attire and personal appearance. Research currently shows there are no model or standard policies and appear more localized in implementation, which feature full policy supporting local laws and community environments. There will be continued review of adjacent jurisdictions. They will determine stakeholders to include for consideration and further input, and also determines that there's a lack of clearly defined terminology may lead to subjective interpretation and non-uniform application. 2, research language with culture, environment, equity, and rights to freedom of expression considerations. Violence and vandalism. The CAC plans collective group will undertake this last board policy committee study area for the 2020-21 school year. Special advisory, hate and bias. The team has gathered relevant information and is preparing its interim report and outlining next action steps. Wellness lens, completed their interim report and submitted to the board. We will turn our focus in the next couple of months to CAC internal procedures and infrastructure to better enable understanding of the CAC role and overall continuity measures the board can have reliance year over year. We wanted to congratulate the board, Dr. Arlotto, all AACPS staff, and future committee members who diligently work to provide the opportunity for in-person learning. Thank you for your leadership and steadfastness. We strive to provide our best efforts and be a resource to the board to achieve our mandate with purpose, direction, and results. We look forward to the work still ahead, knowing our group is poised for success with its talented, professional, and dedicated members. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Next, we have item 2.09, Policy Committee Update.
Okay, can you hear me? Thank you, President Ellis. The Policy Committee met on Tuesday, March 2nd to discuss an initial draft of a new policy on gender and student identity. After extensive discussion, we made some initial changes and will continue the discussion on the development of this policy at our next committee meeting on Tuesday, April 6th. I would like to thank especially the members of the CAC subcommittee, particularly Mr. Egna, who attended the committee meeting, for their extensive report, including community input, policy review, and a significant amount of valuable research. Their report represented, obviously, a tremendous amount of work. The addition of their report helped the policy committee to have the fullest possible discussion. Thank you. Next, we have
Yes, the Budget Committee met yesterday, March 16th, and talked about a number of items, including a debrief of the recently concluded budget amendment process. We received a bit of a revenue update with regard to various iterations of federal relief monies that might apply to K-12, and spoke about the monthly financial reports which show up on our agendas regularly, and in ways we can continue to improve upon those to give members as much information as possible. Our next meeting will be on April 20th at 3:30, and just like the policy committee, it's open to the public, although virtual. So that way, yes, thank you.
Thank you. And for the first time this evening, we have item 2.11, the Equity Committee Update.
Thank you, President Ellis. Good evening, everyone. On this past Monday, March 15th at 4 p.m., there was a preliminary administrative meeting for the Equity Committee. We discussed the organization, membership, member responsibilities, and format for the first meeting of the committee. And I'm pleased to announce that the Equity Committee will be meeting on the second Wednesday of each month at 6 p.m. So please mark your calendars, as our first meeting will be Wednesday, April 14th at 6 p.m. and our second meeting will be Wednesday, May 12th at 6 p.m. If you couldn't tell, I will be chairing the committee. Ms. Antoine and Dr. Tobin will also be joining me as the two other board members on the committee, and we will be joined by staff and members and CAC representatives. Now, to give you a little background on the committee, a little over a year ago at the board's March 4th, 2020 meeting, after public comment by local activists from the NAACP and Caucus of African American Leaders, my predecessor, Ms. Rita Alvey, after a lengthy board discussion, motioned to establish a temporary work group led by a board member to address bias and hate in the school system, immediately with further conversation on the structure and goals discussed at a future board meeting. And as we are all too familiar with, a few days later, the entire nation, AACPS included, was shut down by the COVID-19 pandemic, and the formation of the committee was subsequently put on hold as the school system was thrust into a state of emergency. But the work of equity could not and did not stop. As in May of 2020, George Floyd was murdered at the hands of Minneapolis police, and the summer of 2020 became one of social unrest. In the time since then, AACPS has conducted hundreds of hours of professional development for staff, dozens of book studies, multiple student-led countywide discussions, and that's just to name a few of our many equity-related initiatives. And the Board of Education has doubled down on stating that Black Lives Matter. So as you can see, our school system is truly dedicated to making sure that all truly means all. This equity committee further solidifies that commitment, and I plan to use my role as the chair of the committee to find how this committee fits with the other initiatives within the county and school system. To quote AACPS students from a recent Capital Gazette letter to the editor, teaching our children about equity is teaching them about empathy, how to appreciate others and build a kinder nation. We understand that the education of today's youth is the security of tomorrow's future. I'm sure that I share the view of all of the committee members when I say that I'm truly excited to see what the committee comes up with. And President Ellis, that concludes my report.
I will start over. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you very much for that wonderful report and for taking on yet another very important leadership role for the board and for our students. Next, we have section 3, public comment. We will start with testimony on agenda item 4.02, George Fox Middle School Historical Renaming Evaluation Committee Report. First, we have Mr. Russell Leon.
Good evening, President Ellis, Vice President Schalheim, Dr. Arlotto, and members of the board. My name is Russell Leone, President of the Teachers Association of Anne Arundel County, and I rise in support of the renaming of George Fox Middle School. We know that words matter, but so does who we choose to honor by using their names on our facilities. It has been shared that George Fox, a former superintendent in AACPS, oversaw the school system when it was sued for the inequitable views of Black educators as reflected in the pay gaps between Black and white educators. Fox was on record as stating, the worst white teacher is better than the best Black teacher. Are these words from someone we should continue to honor? As AACPS continues to offer equity PD to educators to support our students, we must also look inward to the symbolic choices we make. As a white educator, I am concerned about the message we send to our students of color each day that they walk into a building named after someone with the views George Fox held. I think about each time our students are encouraged to wear spirit wear bearing his name. I admit that I didn't know the legacy of Mr. Fox, but as I've learned about it, I too believe that we must use what we learn to respect our students and our educators. Our entire TAC Board of Directors voted unanimously to support this action. TAC leadership believes renaming this middle school is one more step towards demonstrating our respect for our students, especially our students of color. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Kate Snyder.
Good evening, President Ellis, Vice President Schalheim, members of the board, and Dr. Arlotto. I am Kate Snyder. I am the Vice President of TAC and a longtime history teacher here in the county. I am here this evening to strongly encourage this board to vote for the change of the name of George Fox Middle School. The TAC leadership team voted unanimously to support the changing of the school's name. In many debates, there are two sides of an argument with a lot of gray areas on each side. This is not the case for this argument. There are two clear sides. One is racist and one is anti-racist. If AACPS truly believes that all means all, then the decision is already made. Change the name. You cannot believe that all means all and vote to keep the school named after a racist man. The decision must be made to change the school's name so that every child in our school system knows that this board is anti-racist. To do so otherwise will prove the board is racist. Every child in our system deserves to know they are valued and believed in. And it can't happen in a building whose namesake believed that Black people were less than. Don't allow his words to leave your thoughts as you discuss this topic. The worst white teacher is better than the best Black teacher. If this board does not stand up and right the wrong by voting for a name change, then you are sending a message of inequity and racism to our educators, students, and community. The debate over this should be short. Just ask yourself these questions. Does all mean all? Are you a racist or an anti-racist? Your answer to these questions will guide your vote tonight. Thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Next, we have testimony on item 5.07, award of contract student transportation consulting services, starting with Laura Booth.
Good evening. I was glad to see that you were honoring your commitment to establishing healthy and safe start and dismissal times for all students, and I hope that this contract will enable AACPS to meet this goal. But I also hope the work will not end there. The inability to fix school start times is only a symptom of the issues that have long existed within our transportation department. In my role as a representative on the Annapolis Education Commission, I can tell you that transportation issues are the #1 concern that members of the public bring to us. Poor transportation policies contribute to issues such as absenteeism. They widen the opportunity gap for our students, and they prevent students from participating in sports, extracurricular activities, and our wonderful magnet programs. It has now been a year since the Prismatic Report was first released, documenting the issues that parents have raised for more than a decade. We've waited anxiously, but there has been little to no indication of how and when these issues will finally be addressed. And for most of this past year, the transportation department wasn't actively involved with transporting students. In neighboring Howard County, they used the time to implement new routing software and increase efficiency in their routes by 20%. Here in Annapolis, Monarch Academy, which opted to secure their own busing contracts to fix their too late school start time, reduced their daily buses from 14 down to 8. But here in AACPS, little, if anything, has changed. There are still 47 buses serving Annapolis High School, with each bus serving an average of 4.7 students. That's not inefficient. That is a gross waste of taxpayer dollars. Dollars which could have been better used in so many other ways in our school system. It is time to stop kicking the transportation can down the road. We can no longer pretend that transportation issues aren't negatively impacting all students across our school system. Our students deserve a transportation system that is on par with the quality of instruction that AACPS offers.
Thank you. And next we have Lisa Van Busker.
Good evening, Board of Education and Dr. Alato. Lisa Van Busker of Start School Later, Anne Arundel County. Tonight, I'm testifying in support of approving the contract with Prismatic Services, Agenda Item 5.07. It was 53 weeks ago that this board heard the presentation by Prismatic Services summarizing their reports, findings, and recommendations. Prismatic identified a lack of procedures, a lack of technology, and legacy ways of work as the 3 main themes hindering improvements to the Transportation Division. These 3 hindrances continue to negatively impact all students across the entire school system. This is perhaps why 345 people thus far have signed a new petition calling for a change in leadership within and potentially extending above the Transportation Division. The community is fed up with the dither and delay tactics routinely impeding transportation improvements and a lack of accountability. So I appreciate that the school system is admitting that they are unable to meet this board's goals of improving transportation and school start times. They need to hire Prismatic to meet your timeline and parameters, including cost neutrality. Perhaps if the full complement of transportation staff authorized by the county council last summer had been hired expeditiously, the new staff could have accomplished the work proposed in Prismatic's contract. We'll never know, but we do know that AACPS has a savings from those unfilled positions, as well as other underspent transportation funds from which Prismatic can be paid. This is a fiscal silver lining of the pandemic that should not be wasted. Such an opportunity is unlikely to present itself again. This contract represents a partial fulfillment of the board's direction to AACPS to report back on efforts to implement school hours next school year by April. I hope that AACPS will continue to provide additional details next month regarding how they plan to address other changes necessitated by new school hours, like food service, extracurriculars, discussions with other county agencies like the police department's crossing guards, Annapolis and county parks and recs, school-age childcare, and MOU for sports facilities, public works for traffic signal changes, and more. Please vote in favor of the contract with Prismatic Services. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have India Oaks.
India Oaks, Hillsmere Elementary. Everyone here knows the importance of shifting school start times. As voted on earlier this year, everyone here saw all the flaws in the transportation system as outlined in the Prismatic report from January 2020, and everyone knows what has and has not been done since that report was released. I took my lunch break today to rewatch the April 5th, 2017 board meeting where Les Douglas presented on the transportation software, which was almost 2 years old by that point. And what I heard in those 37 minutes and 29 seconds were excuse after excuse on why it was taking so long to implement the routing software, saying how different our county is, how careful we had to be. Cherry-picking stories where transportation changes went wrong without saying why they went wrong. It's 2021, 6 years since the software was purchased and over a year since the audit detailed all the flaws in our transportation system and how to correct each one. AACPS continues to delay implementing most of the recommendations, with extra resistance to shifting to new school start times. Our county is no different than others around the nation, and leadership needs to put the needs of our kids first, instead of trying to protecting coworkers or flawed policies. We cannot delay change any longer, and if that means going back to Prismatic to get detailed plans on making such changes, so be it. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, we're going to hear testimony on item 7.01, the 2020-21 reopening update, starting with Letitia Stafford.
Oh, I got my name wrong. It's Latika Hicks.
That's why I didn't say Latika, because I didn't know it was you.
Okay, good evening. Latika Hicks. 1 week ago today, my sons and I were taking advantage of the beautiful weather, and while on our walk, my boys shared with me their plans for the last few months of school. It was a conversation initiated by them. You see, prior to last Wednesday, this conversation would not have been possible due to all of the anxiety caused by the uncertainty of what was going to happen for the spring semester. There were a lot of questions. After weeks of uncertainty, we finally got some relief. Standardized testing won't happen until the fall. More teachers are being vaccinated. My children know their schedule, and thank goodness they still have the teachers who know them. Overall, virtual learning has been a positive experience. Nothing is without its challenges. I understand hybrid is also going well. I'm proud of the work that AACPS, my children, and the teachers have and are doing. I'm telling you this to emphasize the importance of consistency and how that is essential for our mental health and well-being. I could see on my children's faces how the knowing gave them a sense of peace. It did the same for me, but that was short-lived. In Dr. Olado's op-ed that was published on Monday, he expressed that he wants to change things before the end of the school year. My goodness, Dr. Olado, your staff is just working out the details of the current plan. Hybrid students in 4 grades are starting this Monday, the 22nd. Our families are getting settled and you throw this on us. So here I am, once again, pleading to this board to not make any more changes. We have been dealing with so much. Let us breathe. Help my sons and other AACPS students be successful. I don't think I have to explain to any of you on this board how important consistency is to learning. You are all either parents, former educators, or a student. Please, let's stay the course for the remainder of the school year. Ask Dr. Olado to focus on a fall reopening so it can go right from day one. There are many details that must be worked out to accommodate full student population within the school buildings. There is no going back to normal. AACPS can't continue to do what it was doing before. Safety requirements must be met. Questions regarding sanitation, ventilation, safe social interactions, transportation, and what the vaccination requirements would now look like must be answered. Given the size of our district, the planning for the fall must start now. No more changes, please, to the school term. Thank you, and I hope you all stay safe.
Thank you. Kristen Caminiti.
Always with the unmute. I don't think I've ever not unmuted. Anyway, good evening. I'd like to quickly review some of the major occurrences during this school year. The entire semester will be virtual. No, never mind. We're going to bring kids back starting in November. Wait, maybe not. The health officer says it's not a good idea. Well, maybe we can do it anyway. Surveys are sent out. Parents fret about what to choose. No, cases are skyrocketing. Back to fully virtual for the semester. Change the schedule. The vaccine. Hope we can get teachers fully vaccinated before bringing them back. Never mind, the governor wants kids back in school now. Send the surveys again. Change the schedule again. Vaccine manufacturing is delayed. Teachers are brought back into buildings without vaccines. A hybrid plan goes forth full steam ahead. Administrators work their magic, and many are able to create schedules in which teachers are only having to teach simultaneously 2 days a week. Buildings are opened. Reports of joyful, happy in-person kids are frequent. My own children, who are remaining virtual, were worried about what it would be like to have a teacher pulled in 2 directions. They've said there's definitely a difference on the hybrid days, but they said it's okay for just 2 days. I told them this should be the last big change of the school year, and we all breathed a sigh of relief. We were joined by many in doing so. And then Dr. Olado stated in the Capitol that his goal is to get students into buildings 4 days a week. I hope it is clear. You cannot consider opening schools 4 days a week without reissuing the system-wide survey again. There are many parents who chose virtual, believing only 2 days a week would be disruptive. Many of those families would certainly choose to send their children to school 4 days a week. You cannot exclude them from doing so based on their previous choice of 2 days. But reissuing the surveys again will mean more wasted administrator time figuring out classes. It may mean some kids have to change teachers again. It would likely mean teachers and students who are doing the high flex schedule only 2 days a week would now have to do it 4 days a week. Please do not wreak havoc on our system again. Focus everyone's energy on making sure the current hybrid plan remains successful and everyone stays healthy. Focus on getting our schools open 5 days a week in the fall. But please let our students learn and our teachers teach without introducing additional stress into an already very stressful year. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa Davis.
Madam President, that speaker's not signed in.
Tamara Beeger.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If you know our family, we've always been supportive of our schools and staff. When schools shut down last year, we supported the district's decision to keep our families safe. When school started virtually in the fall, we made the best of it. Our children jumped into virtual learning. I supported them at home and our school through serving on the PTA. And I even contemplated juggling working virtually as a sub in a household with 4 kids, a work-at-home husband, and a dog, just to help meet the growing need of subs at our school. When the hybrid plan was announced, we were thankful for a virtual option, and our children have flourished despite the challenges of learning online. When the schedules changed the first time, we pulled up our pants, we made an adjustment. When schools reverted to their normal hours, we were upset with having to rearrange schedules once again, but we ripped up the old schedules, put up the new ones, reset our reminder alarms, and we made it work. And now we are hearing that there could be more changes to come. Dr. Arlotto, board members, I've been patient, but I'm tired. My children are tired. Their teachers and school staff and administrators are tired. My fellow coworkers are tired. My husband is tired of hearing me talk about how everybody's tired, and we are done. We're overcooked. We're at our breaking points. And I don't want to keep anyone else from being able to get what they need for their own child. But a plan was made. Families made choices based on that plan. And it's time that the board follows through and stops making more changes. We're 3 months, and I counted today, exactly 63 school days away from the end of the school year. Please don't waste time upending schedules or classes or teacher assignments all over again. Please leave the plan as is and focus on keeping our current students and staff in the building safe, developing a robust summer program for students in need, and creating a clear, strong plan for the fall. Enough is enough. We've been patient, we've done our best, and we just ask that please, no more changes. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, this evening, India Oaks.
India Oaks, Hillsmere Elementary. In the recent opinion piece, Dr. Arlotto stated he hopes to reopen schools to 4 days a week by the end of this school year. Focusing on reopening to 4 days a week with only 3 months left of school would be putting blinders on to the actual needs of tens of thousands of families and teachers. We all are human. We all function on routine, especially our kids. And we all have been forced to change routines and schedules not once, not twice, but at least 3 times this school year. And now you are considering upheaving everyone's routines again, just as everyone is getting used to the new hybrid model. The focus needs to be on the families that didn't go hybrid and why whole communities stayed virtual. We need to understand their needs to have a successful reopening in the fall, instead of the wishes of financially stable families who had the ability to send their kids to school 2 days a week. Most families do not have the ability to just switch work and childcare needs to accommodate a hybrid schedule, and all you will be doing is expanding the inequity gap. As flawed as AACPS remains in its policies, my son is one of those smiling hybrid kids. Yet the fact my son needs to be in school and I have a job that allows me flexibility, that I have a car and health insurance, does not take priority over the thousands of families who are not so lucky and can't break routine yet again. If we truly care about our kids and teachers, we must focus on supporting the needs of everyone for the fall and not mess with everyone's mental health even more these next 3 months.
Thank you. And that concludes our public comment. Now we are at section 4, presentations, beginning with item 4.01, student wellness lens report.
Thank you. I have a couple of slides. I think they need to get shared. Do you guys have the slides or do you want me to share them from here?
Dr. Newman, can you share your screen?
Oh, yeah, I thought you guys were going to do it. Hold on just a sec. Sorry about that. And my apologies. I'm just pulling them up now. I'm sorry, I'm having an issue here.
Would you like us to try to share from this end?
Yeah, could you do that? That for some reason it seems it's not compatible or something. Great, thank you. So good evening, President Ellis, Vice President Schalheim, members of the board, Dr. Arlotto, and the many parents and teachers watching at home. I am honored to be able to share with you the CAC's recommendations for implementing a wellness lens in AACPS. Next slide, please. So a wellness lens extends beyond a traditional wellness perspective. A wellness lens seeks to evaluate whether a particular policy, practice, or decision is in the best interest of students of AACPS by addressing the central question of, is this good for the whole child? Next slide, please. Utilizing guidance from sources such as the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Psychological Association, and the collective experience and expertise of the CAC committee members, we present our 6 recommended pillars of an AACPS whole child wellness lens. Next slide. So the first examines physical wellness and health. This incorporates aspects such as the safety and emergency preparedness in our schools, which ensures not only the necessary technology and infrastructure to keep kids safe, but also ensures that the practice of emergency preparedness drills is done at developmentally appropriate levels and with the emotional well-being of our students in mind. It also includes health measures, such as ensuring the cleanliness of our buildings, providing provision of nursing services, but also health education services to increase awareness and reduce stigma of common conditions in our schools. Furthermore, it incorporates the plentiful research on child-adolescent sleep needs, circadian cycles, physical activity, and nutritional needs, each of which has a profound impact on academic achievement and mental health in our children. Next slide. The second addresses social and emotional well-being of our youth. This includes promoting positive peer interactions, as well as positive student-staff interactions, provision of high-quality mental health services in our schools, both proactively and reactively, the implementation of research-supported bullying and suicide prevention programs, and implementation of necessary diversity and inclusion practices, thus allowing students a safe place for identity development and self-expression. Next slide. The third and fourth incorporate developmental and cognitive or academic needs, with consideration for both the typically developing child at various educational levels, but also our neurodiverse students who may have different developmental or academic needs. This includes an emphasis on consistency and developmentally appropriate transitions. It also focuses on research-based curriculums, instructions, academic interventions, and means of assessment with recognition that there's no one-size-fits-all model. Next slide. The fifth pillar incorporates our families and communities as key players in student well-being, acknowledging the importance of these school-community partnerships and addressing the academic, physical, and emotional needs of our students, both in and outside of our school buildings. Next slide. And last, but certainly not least, we emphasize the necessity of staff and teacher well-being as having a direct impact on our students' learning and social emotional well-being. The provision of teacher trainings for things such as general classroom management, behavior management for special needs children, implicit bias, etc., has a profound effect on our students. And research has clearly emphasized that employees who feel valued, supported, and who are able to focus on their own health and well-being are significantly more successful overall. Our teachers truly are what makes AACPS awesome, and this has been consistently highlighted throughout this pandemic. Supporting our teachers and school staff is good for the whole child. Next slide. On behalf of the Wellness Lens Committee and the CAC as a whole, I thank you for this opportunity to support AACPS.
Thank you, Ms. Newman, or Dr. Newman. Thank you so much for your presentation. And I did have a chance to read through the detailed report, and just another amazingly excellent product from the CAC. The time and effort and thoroughness that went into the research and the collaboration is it's apparent as you read through. And this is certainly a topic that's been very near and dear to my heart, and I know my fellow board members as well. So I just wanted to take a moment and express our gratitude, and please share that with the entire committee. And that
Will
being,
do. Thank you.
Thank you. That being said, I will go around and see if there's any questions or comments for you, and I'll begin with Ms. Frank.
I have no comments at this time, but I do want to say thank you. I did read the report, and there are a lot of really great things in there. I especially like that we looked at safety and sleep and nutrition and exercise and some of these ideas that a lot of the board members have talked about meeting after meeting and really just sort of consolidated that. So I do appreciate. Thank you.
Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Newman. And I want to echo everyone else's thanks. This is another extraordinary report. Also a subject near and dear to my heart. I just wanted to say, I thought, obviously it covered, it was extensive, and I was so glad of that. My own view has always been that the well-being of the whole child has to be the ground on which academic progress occurs, not the other way around. And so I just ask if you have any additional thoughts you'd like to share with us as to how this should be used going forward. I mean, as a lens, I'm thinking of something along the lines of the equity lens that we use, but also kind of like in legislative work, there's a fiscal note, right, that is attached to every board that says, here's what the impact will be. And that's sort of what comes to my mind, but I'm just curious if you have any additional thoughts you'd like to share.
No, I think that would be kind of the ideal, to have, whenever a new policy or procedure comes up, that's kind of the last question. Okay, from a wellness lens, what are we missing, or what could we add to this in order to further enhance this, by, again, kind of looking at those 6 key areas and how it affects whatever the particular topic is. I know that Fairfax County Public Schools have implemented a wellness lens that's similar, so it might be interesting to get their feedback on how they're using it. But yeah, I think it's a lot of great ideology. It's putting it into practice that I think will be really the next step.
I couldn't agree more, and I hope we as a board will pursue that. But again, I read the entire report. I want to thank you and your colleagues who put it together, and say that I think it's tremendously valuable. And it's we take the baton, and now it's our job to keep it moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Ms. Corkadell. And Ms. Corkadell, I want to point out that this work got done or got started under your leadership and direction, and I want to thank you for kicking that off. You are on mute, I believe.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a double clicker. What can I say? No, this was a team effort, and I think it goes along in tandem with the conversation that is on so many people's minds, and that's the wellness of our family, the wellness of our community. And our CAC has people don't recognize, they're that group in the background that just comes visits us, but they have a broad, diverse group that has brought so much to the table, particularly in wellness and the whole child conversations. And thank you so much for all your hard work. This is one of the most dedicated bunch of volunteers and group, and their commitment to one another and their leaders and their colleagues is a true testament as we continue to see these outcomes that will guide us. I don't have any questions for you guys because I know you were in good hands throughout the course, and the thoroughness of your report and the opportunities that it now presents to us, I am definitely looking forward to in the coming months and in the coming years. And hopefully in a couple of years, we can ask you guys to look back and maybe give us a score of how well we're doing. And I will look forward to that as well. I'm a self-evaluation fan, so I look forward to that next step. And in the interim, I know it will well serve us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. Silkworth.
I can tell you that this wellness lens will make a difference in the lives of many of our, not just our students, but also our staff. I did have the opportunity to be able to attend the CAC meeting, and I agree with Ms. Corkadell. The folks that serve are so dedicated, and there is such a wide variety of expertise there. And the wellness of the whole child should be one of our #1 focuses. And so I would, I noticed on one of the graphics that word awesome. I just have to say, Anne Arundel County CAC is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
No comments. I just want to comment on the awesome work of the CAC here. Dr. Newman, please send my thanks to the entire rest of the committee that worked on this, because I'm sure we all are well aware that, especially at this time, mental health, especially among our students, is very, very important. And just as a student who has seen the firsthand effects of, my fellow peers when they're struggling or when they're on their good days, it just goes to show. And I just want to leave you all with this. I'm sure you've heard it a lot of times, but health is wealth. And, when our students are healthy, our school system is we're going to soar to great heights. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I just want to.
What about? Are we going around?
Oh, I forgot where we started. Sorry.
Yeah.
Ms. Shawn.
Yeah. Thank you. Not to steal anyone else's thunder, but I couldn't. There's no way I could say it better than the rest of my colleagues. Thank you for this fabulous piece of work, and I read through it in its entirety as well, and was very, very impressed. We absolutely need to implement this, and it gives us a lot to chew on and to move forward with. And I hope to see this attached to other upcoming agendas. We can figure out ways to implement it immediately. And I just thank you for your work. I think the CAC, just really incredible stuff. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And Ms. Antwine had stepped away. Ms. Antwine, would you like to say or ask any questions on the Student Wellness Lens report? You were on mute, but. Ms. Antwine gives her thanks as well. And yeah, once again, a big thank you. This obviously is only the beginning, but it is a remarkable beginning, something that we can really use. And there's so many directions, so many ways, we could choose to pursue this. So I know the conversations will be had. I have no doubt we will see this and aspects of this on our agendas in the future. Thanks to your Great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening. We are going to take, one moment. Sorry, just making sure I got this right. We're going to take just a 2-minute recess because we're going to switch formats now to, we'll be live in person in the room. Thank you. We are back, and we are now on item 4.02, George Fox Middle School Historical Renaming Evaluation Committee Report. And with us this evening, we have this wonderful committee, and we want to thank you for being here.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, and Dr. Olato. My name is Tony Spencer, and I had the pleasure of chairing the committee that examined the history of George Fox. Last year, after hearing more about Superintendent George Fox, the Anne Arundel County School Board voted to have a committee study the name of George Fox Middle School and make a recommendation to the board by March 2001 as to whether the school should be renamed. The school board voted 9-0. And today we come before you to share our work and our recommendation. I would now like to officially introduce the members of the committee, all of whom wanted to be present tonight to present our findings and recommendation. Again, for the record, my name is Tony Spencer, chair of this committee and former vice president of the Anne Arundel County School Board here in Anne Arundel. So, our members.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Eve Case. I am the coordinator for social studies for Anne Arundel County Public Schools.
Hello, my name is Amanda Harper, and I am a member of the Anne Arundel NAACP.
My name is Jamie Herman Cougnay, and I'm the Vice President of the PTSA of George Fox Middle and the Northeast Cluster Rep for the Superintendent's Parent Involvement Advisory Council.
My name is Valerie Mills Cooper, a former teacher at George Fox Middle School and retired Anne Arundel County Public School Administrator.
I'm Rhonda Pendell Charles. I am an Annapolis City Councilwoman, as well as an Anne Arundel County Public Schools School Community Liaison Specialist, and Moderna has got me a little bit down this evening.
I'm Shannon Pugh. I'm the Director of Community and School Programming here for the district.
Hi, I'm Janice Hayes Williams, a local historian and a mighty Panther, an alum of Annapolis High School.
Our committee first met on September 25th, 2020, and continued to meet twice a month until January of 2021. During our meetings and the weeks in between, we've researched George Fox, the history of Jim Crow and segregation in Anne Arundel County, and the history and ruling of the precedent-setting court case, Mills v. Lowndes. Many members of the community also submitted testimony and documents that helped in our deliberation.
At our first meeting, we discussed our desire to frame our work around guiding questions that could be used in any community to consider the name of any school or building. The questions we agreed on were: did the individual make an extraordinary contribution or sacrifice to local, state, or national society, history, or culture, and what was the primary legacy? 2, does the individual's primary legacy align with or reflect the current mission, vision, and values of Anne Arundel County Public Schools? 3, Does the primary legacy of the individual inspire current students to strive for individual and collective excellence? 4, when considering the individual's primary legacy, would students from all backgrounds feel accepted and included in a building named for this individual? And 5, what impact did the individual's actions, decisions have upon different groups of stakeholders in the community?
As to our findings regarding question 1, George Fox was the first person to hold the title of Superintendent of Schools in Anne Arundel County. And as the first person to hold this title, he was successful in organizing the various aspects of the district, including building construction and revising curriculum. However, the committee found that Fox neglected to invest the same efforts and funds toward advancements in the education of Black students. Fox supported the building of consolidated schools for white students, while relying on the Rosenwald program to privately fund the maintenance of 1- and 2-room schools for Black students. These efforts laid the foundation for decades of segregation that forced many Black students and families in the years prior to district transportation to choose to either find ways to attend the few Black schools that took hours to travel to, or to give up on education.
Fox's primary legacy is traced to the 1937 lawsuit filed by the NAACP on behalf of Walter Mills and the Anne Arundel County Public Schools Black educators who were paid less than those of white teachers. Beginning in the 1920s, surrounding school districts began to remove race as a determining factor in salary scales, but AACPS, under the direction of Fox, did not choose to follow other districts. At the time of the lawsuit, the average pay for white teachers in AACPS was $1,100, while the average pay of Black teachers was $800, with Black educators with more credentials, education levels, paid less than white teachers with less credentials. As the case made its way through the court system, Fox was adamant that he was not going to propose raising the pay of Black teachers, as that would mean reducing the pay of white teachers. In response to pressure concerning the pay issue, Fox is reported to have said that he would not pay any quite, quote, colored teacher, unquote, as much as he paid any white teacher because his, quote, poorest white teacher was a better teacher than his best colored teacher, unquote. The lawsuit argued by attorney Thurgood Marshall was successful, and AACPS was ordered to equalize pay between Black and white teachers. AACPS discontinued using race as a factor in the educator pay scale in 1941 and was one of the last surrounding school districts to do so.
Although Fox and the school board did abide by the order of the court 2 years after it was issued, Fox's primary legacy is that he actively fought against equalizing the pay of white and Black educators. He minimized efforts by the district to teach education of Black and white students equally. Fox was a product of his time, but his time also included school districts around Maryland and the county that were making strides to address racial inequities. And Fox did not choose to advocate for the fair treatment of Black and white teachers and students in an equitable manner. This is his primary legacy.
Now, moving on to question 2, where we look at if the individual's primary legacy aligns with or reflects the current mission, vision, and values of Anne Arundel County Public Schools. The current Anne Arundel County Public Schools strategic plans identifies all means all and ready, set, launch as 2 values central to the mission of Anne Arundel County Public Schools. Within these 2 values are the explicit statements that in Anne Arundel County Public Schools, all students, families, community members feel welcome. Diversity is invited, nurtured, and celebrated, and that all students are prepared for college, career, and community. The primary legacy of George Fox, as explained previously, rests with a legacy of inequity. A legacy of inequity goes directly against the mission, vision, and values of Anne Arundel County Public Schools.
As we deliberated on question 3, we concluded that due to George Fox's documented stance on the value of Black educators and Black education, he would not inspire current students to strive for individual and collective excellence. If anything, his legacy could drive students apart, as he repeatedly modeled a lack of inclusion or appreciation of diversity within his work. Policies established under George Fox and perpetuated by future educational leaders in Anne Arundel County did not allow for African American students to reach their individual excellence.
As we deliberated on question 4, we considered the current student body of George Fox Middle School. Approximately 20% of the students who attend George Fox Middle School today come from diverse backgrounds. Almost 10% of the students are African American. These students would have experienced marginalization and a lack of priority under the leadership of George Fox. Examining this legacy would not bring a sense of acceptance or inclusion to these students, but instead continue to build the web of systematic racism that they have already experienced. According to the values of Anne Arundel County Public Schools, no member of the student body would feel pride in the legacy of George Fox.
As to our final question, the actions and decisions of George Fox helped some stakeholders to progress and kept some stakeholders oppressed. This division was along racial lines through his direct actions and testimony as Superintendent George Fox was superintendent from 1916 to 1946. And yes, he is credited with moving Anne Arundel County Public Schools from a 19th century model to a 20th century one. But the 20th century model that he championed was built on Jim Crow and segregationist policies and practices that still impact our school system today and are the foundations of the opportunity gap that this school board is currently working with the community on overcoming. Our African American and other students of color deserve better.
When this school board considered the formation of this committee, then school board member Julie Hummer said, "It is time to reckon with our histories and acknowledge that people are imperfect. Imperfections can be forgiven, people can grow and change, but even with the lens of forgiveness, the name of a school may not be an appropriate tribute." Our committee unanimously concurs with Ms. Hummer's sentiments. The committee was tasked with researching the name of George Fox Middle School and to make a recommendation as to whether the school should be renamed. Based upon the review of the available evidence and the answers to our guiding questions, the committee's recommendation is that George Fox Middle School should be renamed. We want to be clear that as a committee, we do not view this recommendation as part of the so-called cancel culture. We view this recommendation as doing right by children. Whenever possible, we as adults have to provide examples to students to promote acceptance and inclusion. To have students sit in a building named for a man who championed Jim Crow and segregationist policies and structures does not align with AACP's core value of all means all. Thank you.
Do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you. Thank you for your thorough research, for your report this evening, and for being here. I have to say, Ms. Pindle, Charles, we hope that you feel better very quickly, and we're very disappointed not to see you here with us this evening, but feel better. Yes, I will
Thank you so much. This was my second vaccination, so I'm getting there.
Yeah, good for you. So we will start this evening with Ms. Frank.
I just wanted to thank you all for the time that you put into this. I mean, it's very evident that you guys really researched the history, and I do appreciate that. I do see a couple of familiar faces from Pasadena, so I appreciate that we had at least one or two folks from the community on this committee. I don't have any questions right now, but I would like to, when everyone has had a chance to speak, to possibly make a motion. Thank you.
Before anyone else speaks, I'd just like to thank, first of all, Dr. Olato for giving me the opportunity. It means a lot that I can still be a part of the community. Having been on the school board, but also having been raised, I didn't think about this until after some of the reports came in from folks who actually went to school at George Fox, that I was born and raised in Jim Crow initially. And it didn't hit me until I heard their stories, and some didn't want to share their stories, how painful it was for those who held back. But then one person decided to do it anyway. Got to writing, he couldn't stop. And then I said, wait a minute, I was in that time frame. I went from Jim Crow into civil rights. So it was such an honor to be a part of that, to be asked. But man, I got to tell you, you have a team here. No, I said, you have a team. Yes, please applaud. Who started? Applaud. You have a team of people who understood the responsibility. I think Amanda said she was the newest person and she didn't understand all of it. But listen, when she did her investigation along with Janice and everybody else, oh man. So I have to say this. I said this to them out in a quarter, and it was a kind of a joke, but hear this. I laughed at my father because he was bald-headed. And all he said was, live long enough. And I said, what does he mean by that? So the thing is, the point was, your turn is coming. Your time is coming. And just because you aren't hurting now, your time is coming. If you don't do the right thing now, your time is coming. But we have the opportunity, the space, and the time to create the document based on folks' integrity and dedication. And I just want to say to the committee, thank you. Thank you. You listening, Rhonda?
I'm listening.
Okay.
85 pages worth.
So.
Thank you. Thank you for those great words. Dr. Tobin.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is an extraordinary document that you produced. I've read it all once. I will read it again many times. I wish everyone could. I understand many of the things in it are not meant for public dissemination. I hope there will come a time when they can be. You've taught us history, and you've shown the huge amount of work and commitment that went into this to get it right. I want to also thank especially those who had the courage and the strength to share their memories, their experiences, because I know that was probably not pleasant or easy. And as a member of this board, to those people, to all the people, I want to apologize. No child, no human being should ever be subject to those experiences. As a Board of Education, our most basic commitment must be to the safety and the dignity of every child in our care. And so it is my sincere hope and my personal promise that as we know better, we will do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Corkadell.
Well, that would be incredibly hard to follow in and of itself. And I definitely don't want to reiterate sentiments that I think we all share. But I do want to personally acknowledge and recognize and thank each and every single member of the committee and the community who is willing to come together for this. These are hard conversations in hard times. And I gotta say, when Ms. Hummer brought it to my attention, my concern was, do we have the strength as a community to have this conversation now? And we've well demonstrated that we do, and we must, because that's how we move forward. I want to thank all of you. Can't enough. Some of you I know personally and have worked with from time to time. I know where your heart is, and to see that expression, to be able to make a substantive difference in not just this generation, but for generations of future. Time to turn the page and start a new chapter. And I'm very proud and humbled to be part of that. Thank you.
Before we go to any further questions, could I make another comment? I'm older than this young lady I'm going to mention first, but she's my big sister. Rhonda Pindell Charles. Man, she said, call me any hour of the night. I said, you got to be kidding. Don't call me any hour of the night. But she meant that. And anything I needed from her to get better understanding, she provided. Eve Case, she provided. Dr. Shannon provided. Janice is going to provide it if you don't want to hear it. But Janice has a major history and commitment to this because she had a family member along with Valerie Mills Cooper. And I'd like to tell you that Valerie Mills Cooper is the daughter of Mr. Walter S. Mills. She also worked at George Fox, and Janice Hayes Williams' mother, Mrs. Virginia Hayes, worked for George Fox. We had a lot of contributing people whom you may not see on paper, but have made this come alive. And by giving us the information and having respected what they've asked us to do, that it not be said outside the context of this requirement of the report. I respected that. The, oh gracious, the reporter, I forgot her name now, I'm sorry, called me this evening from the Capitol. And I wouldn't go beyond a certain point because I didn't have permission to go past a certain point. And I wanted her to understand that what needs to be reported, we're going to say certain things tonight, and then the school system will do the rest. But I wasn't going to go beyond a certain point. Having been on the school board before, they said, actually a question here, ask the same question a different way. That's okay. But I want to thank you for the opportunity and for Janice's mother, for Valerie's father. How hard is it today for you to stand by yourself doing desegregation, okay? How hard do you think it was for him doing segregation to do it, knowing that he may lose everything? And that's why we're here tonight, because that's the kind of soul, that's the kind of heart that we have. So I want to thank those people specifically. I know I didn't mention everybody by name, but gracious me, you have such a, I said it before, I can't say it enough. Eve, thank you. I keep getting people mixed up because it's the first time I saw their faces. But I just want to say that everyone contributed a major part to this, and it's no small thing. I was asked one question, would this be the model for any other school that needed to be changed? And I couldn't answer that. All I could say is that when Dr. Shannon gave us this information, it was so much to add to the report and have a standard to go by, okay? Others may see it down the road and say, listen, this is not what we want to go by. That's fine. But it worked for this time, for this purpose, and hopefully it does justice for what you've asked us to do, Dr. Orlado. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have one, this is Rhonda again. I have one comment to make. And we talk about trauma, and that's a huge word recently. But we've had a lot of unresolved trauma as a result of what has happened over the past several decades. And I'll speak for myself personally. I'm going to tell about a few years ago, I think I never really realized the impact that it really had on me and my life and a lot of my classmates and schoolmates. It has really been an eye. I can speak for Annapolis, of course, but there are a lot of reasons, but one particular one is why we have so many subsidized and public housing communities within our city. This has been a direct impact on that, and the trauma has contributed to that as well. So thank you all so very much for your time, for the opportunity, a great group that we work with. I can't say it enough. I think Mr. Spencer has done it all, but thank you all and God bless you all.
Thank you. Mr. Silkworth.
Can y'all hear me?
No. Your mic's. Oh.
Yeah, outdoor voice.
Yep. Mr. Smith.
I just want to say this was well, first, thank you all for this, because I think this needed to happen, and two, it's very interesting, right? It's terrible history to read about, but it's very interesting. I hope that this is just the start, not of just renaming schools, but of maybe the formation of like a AACPS history committee, because I just think that the local history is often overlooked. And just from stories from my grandparents and their generation, it's a lot of history to unpack there. And I think students would really benefit from it going forward. And it's funny, she just went in the bathroom, but I often enjoy reading Miss Hayes Williams' posts in this one Facebook group where she's often talking about local Annapolis history. And it's just that unknown history. I think we need to really be kept alive. But I just want to comment on Mr. Fox's legacy. It was not just his words, but his actions, according to the report given to the board. He did not fund the colored schools of the county, and I think it just goes to show that the man was truly a racist. And we're talking about his impact and his legacy and what that did to some students. Some students were either forced to pick between going to school or making a long walk, or just not going to school. And I'll tell you, one of those students that had to make a long walk was my grandfather. He was born and raised in Lothian, still lives down there, and he had to walk to Bates High School some days because the bus just did not come. And for me, I don't even like walking to the bus stop. I can't imagine walking all the way to school. And just another thing, it says, to quote the report, it is impossible to determine the far-reaching effects of Mr. Fox's personal biases, but I think we can measure them. In his attempt to keep Black students subjugated and lesser than their white counterparts, I think he ended up making them more resilient. I'm going back to my grandfather and his generation. They're just a resilient group of people that I hope, going forward, our students can truly learn about them. I'm sure, Ms. Case, you can appreciate this, for our National History Day competition. Maybe we could do something like a local History Day competition, right? Where students have to research a local hero. An interesting figure in this report was Miss Sarah V. Jones. I heard her name briefly because she's just one line on the board outside. If you see walking in of all the superintendents, I think that's just very interesting. So once again, I just want to thank you all for this report, and I really want to thank Ms. Hummer. I hope she gets a chance to speak, for bringing this up, because I do remember in July of last year when I first got elected to the board, I was actually at my uncle's pool when she called me, and she would say, "Hey, here's what I'm thinking about George Fox." I said, "Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense." And now here we are. I just think Ms. Hummer and you, Mr. Spencer, you really showed me that just because you're a former board member doesn't mean that you fade away. Just keep coming back for more. So,
That's right.
Thank you all.
Let me say something to you. And don't think just because you're younger, please everyone hear this, that we can't learn from you. Speak truth to power. The truth is not going to change. And many times people think that because you are younger, you're a male, you're a Black male, you're a woman, you're Asian or whatever, that you can't teach them anything. You keep speaking truth. Keep speaking truth. Because the day I stop learning is the day I die. And the more I realize, more I learn, I don't know. So share what you know. Thank you.
Ms. Antwine, would you?
As much as I want to say, I'm having the toughest time under this mask. You guys have done incredible work. thank you very much for this. And I am all for your recommendation. And I'm also for enhancing history, not eradicating it. So thank you so much for this report.
Mr. Silkworth?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Lara just has a knack to put groups together that happen to be absolutely awesome, like our CAC. This group is absolutely awesome. I want to thank you so much, each and every one of you, for your efforts. And it's clear it's time to reckon with this issue, and it's time to make it right and make it right now. So again, I thank you so much. I've got a few years on me. I was a 49-year teacher, have a lot of history in this county. When I read that report and I listened to you all tonight, I learned an awful lot. And again, I thank you so much for this. Thank you.
Ms. Schallheim?
Thank you. It's an incredible report. Your work is incredible. Sir, amen to everything he said. And it's a very tough act to follow after, again, my colleague said it so beautifully. Of course, I'm interested in supporting your recommendation. And, you know, if not you, who, if not now, when? And it is us, and it's time. So thank you so much for your work and for your dedication to making sure all means all, finally. Yeah. Thank you.
Dr. Arlotto, after putting this committee together and seeing the presentation, do you want to contribute?
I'll never push myself away from the microphone. So absolutely, I'd like to take the opportunity before you close us out. Of course, it's a big thank you. But this is important work on several levels. Certainly, first and foremost, it's the content that you were wrapping your arms around, that you were researching, that you were struggling with as a committee for the good of this county. So it's the content that is, first and foremost, led us to your work. It is then the process that you put together and thought really clearly about, because that will lead us, as you have already said, into the future. And that was part of our goal all along, was we haven't done this before. Let's do it well. Let's do it right. And this will lead us into the future. And then lastly, and it's probably going to be one of the highlights of my time in Anne Arundel County, was the ability to make suggestions about who we could put together to form the committee, and seeing the relationships that have developed amongst you and the work that you were able to produce. And so I didn't think of Mr. Spencer immediately. That suggestion was put into the back of my head. And I thought, this is a fabulous suggestion. Let me call him on the phone and see what he says. And he didn't hesitate. And I know that's no surprise to you if you're even meeting him for the first time. We have known each other a couple of years in passing through this county.
Right.
Not only is he a longtime member of this community and a former member of this school board, but an artist and a performer of some renown.
Thank you.
And when the suggestion was made to me and I got the chance to reconnect over the phone, and you didn't hesitate, and we immediately began to brainstorm to say, what might this look like? And most importantly, who do we put together to do the work? Including Ms. Pindell Charles, who's not with us physically. And so I thank you for that. I thank each of you. This is important work, the content. This is important work in helping us move forward into the future and creating the process. And I'm delighted in the relationships that were built, because when you put the right people together, they can move mountains. And so know how much that's appreciated. And so thank you for a minute to say a word or two, and I look forward to spending some more time together.
May I say something else before we go? This comes from Margaret Mead. Never think that a small group of concerned citizens can't make a difference. Usually they're the only ones that can. And so having the opportunity to speak forward, I have to thank also President Jackie also. She's the president of the NAACP. And I asked Dr. Alado who we involved in NAACP because of their history and what we're trying to do and accomplish. And also Valerie Mills Cooper. I mean, I played the part of Mr. Mills in a play written by Valerie's husband. And so with that, I had to do some research. And my God, you think about what people have done when they're up against the wall by themselves and they go anyway. So for those people, I hate to just, call out, but I have to because we are a community. We will always be a community. And if you decide not to let it be a community, what next? What next? So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I have to say, imagining you playing, performing and playing a character like that, I have no doubt it was captivating. And I would love to have seen that. And again, so many have said so much. There's little I can add because it was all said so well. But your work is much appreciated. And I have to mention Ms. Hummer, who is with us here this evening. And thank you for starting us down this path. Thank you for being here to see it through. And Ms. Frank would like.
Yes, I have a couple of things that I would like to say to preface this. I would not support an active or ongoing investigation into all schools. But when community members come to board members with concerns, the appropriate response is to investigate and possibly reevaluate what is appropriate. Evaluating someone's life decades after their death and using a historical perspective is not something that I think that we should engage in more often than is truly necessary. To that end, it is my suggestion that we encourage using geographical names in as much as possible. It was welcome to hear from this committee that there is not an interest in supporting cancel culture. This is not a fictional skunk. And this was not a subjective one-time comment. When we find instances of true racism, we should acknowledge it, and we should acknowledge that it requires a high bar. But we also need to acknowledge that the board is ultimately responsible for having named the school George Fox, not the community. And there is pride in our community. And I would like to ask this committee if it would be appropriate, or ask Dr. Arlotto if it would be appropriate to somehow address the concerns of the community alumni who may be sentimental with the name of their school in perhaps some sort of plaque or display or an alumni area, just to make sure that we preserve their experience. So I'm not sure if Dr. Arlotto, if you have any thoughts on that, and we can certainly come back to that at another point.
Yeah, I think that is, so I think you ask a really good question because like so many schools, it is an intricate part of the neighborhood, right, of the community. Putting the name aside, it is the school itself where people attended and have memories and took place in learning. And so what's appropriate to recognize that past, I don't know. But it's certainly worthy of a conversation, of us continue to have that conversation. But I don't think anybody is, and certainly I know you are not. But if the decision by this board is to explore the possibility of renaming the school, that would be done through a process that is dictated by policy and regulatory language that this boards previous to you had established many, many years ago. But in no way would be working to erase the history that people had in that building. Because we do need to separate the building, the physical structure, from what occurs inside the building. And in the end, that's the most important thing. And I don't want to erase somebody's history of the work they did in that building, the teachers, the administrators, the students, because that's important and that is their history and that's personal. But we can teach our students and ourselves a great lesson in considering the renaming of a building for someone that really truly offers and proffers the values of this school system. So I think it's a great question. I think it's worthy of a continued conversation about how we honor that history while we are moving forward.
I think that was very well stated. I appreciate your perspective on that. And to further continue with what I had requested of President Ellis, I move to adopt the recommendation of the George Fox Middle School Historical Renaming Evaluation Committee to change the name of George Fox Middle School to reflect the values of the community, understanding that the Pasadena community will recommend a new name for the board to consider for approval.
Second.
Got a unanimous second on that.
Yep. For the minutes, unanimous second.
Okay, we have a motion and multiple seconds. And so is the board interested in engaging in discussion, or will we stand with our comments and go ahead and vote? All right.
Ms. Ellis, I just
Yes,
have one question.
absolutely.
When picking a new name, will the community also pick a new mascot or have the option to, if they want to, keep the Fox mascot? Right, that's all up to the community. Is that in our policy?
That is not. So it's a great question. What would take place next would be the renaming process, much like when we, those of you that are familiar, as we named the new Crofton High School, or when we named a number of years ago the new Nantucket Elementary School. There's a process by which the community will be engaged and involved. A great deal will count on the PTA to do much of that work and bring the community together. How we'll bring the community together in this current environment, we're gonna have to work on that. We won't be able to have a meeting of 700 people in the gym like we did it, right? So we'll have to work on that. But you do ask a good question regarding the mascot or school colors. That's not part of a renaming. That's left to the local community, the local school, regarding a mascot, school colors, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, so wait, so just so I'm clear, the school administrators or the community itself?
It would be the principal could engage the school, the students regarding a school mascot, which is again, how that occurred. Once we came up with a name for Crofton High School, the principal then began and engaged students that would be, she actually went down to the middle school where the students were soon to be Crofton High School students and engaged them in a series of conversations and votes about mascots.
Okay, great, thank you.
You ready to vote? Ms. Howe?
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Antwine?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you. Before we are told to get out, may I just, while Mr. Fox was, his name was on that building, he was the superintendent of the entire school system. And his rules and his way of thinking affected the entire school system and the students and the families for years. I would ask you to consider having more of the community, being the Anne Arundel County community, be a part of that, because many of those folks who don't live in the area went to that school. So I would ask you to consider having a broader range of folks, as you did for this committee, to be a part of that. I had to be very objective with this. I was on it when Dr. Olato asked me. I'll be very honest with you after that. What bothered me was the fact that I had a cousin who was killed in that community. And I learned on the school board, and Darren will tell you, the role here for the school board members, I want you to hear this, I'm not trying to educate you, but first fiduciary, and the guide, the governor, and the plan, to learn your role not to intimidate a school teacher, but I'm a school board, a school board member, I'll get you fired. Because some of the members have done that. If you haven't done that yet, I hope you don't grow to that level. But they've done that. Learn your role and how you're supposed to serve, because what you do sometimes can't be erased, as we can see with this, for decades. So I would ask you to consider reaching out to the community at large, along with that community, because other folks the folks that gave us our testimonies don't live in that community now. Now, my family on my mother's side are from Pasadena, very entrenched with that. And that's when the incidents happened at Chesapeake, I volunteered to go down there. Then my wife went with me. And the Northern Arundel Cultural Preservation Society members, NACAPs, went with me. So you have other people in the community that have been affected by it with issues that never were resolved. So we need to have, a broader perspective than just that community to have a voice, because he was the superintendent for the entire school system. And I was affected by it in the first and second and third grades until we moved to Freetown, Marley Nake Elementary on Solly Road, by getting secondhand books, old dirty desk, gum still on them, had to take it off ourselves, things that were scarred into the desks, not getting proper supplies. That didn't happen in George Fox, that happened in the school system. So please consider when you, how you approach this, you have people who have some input from around the county, because they were affected by the superintendent who ran the county schools. Thank you.
May I? I just wanted to mention that there are a bunch of angels here that work for George Fox, including my mother, who was insulted by him because she was too smart. You're not supposed to be that smart. You're Black. You're not a white teacher. So in this process, I talked to some of his former teachers. What about them? You have a retired teachers association. No one has ever said, I'm sorry for what George Fox put you through. And in this process, those that are still alive, I beg you, the system, to say thank you for what you endured. We are making the change that they wanted 60 years ago. So please do not forget your retired teachers. I picked up the phone, and one of the teachers that worked with my mother, she was so excited. Her daughter called me the next day. She said, I never heard my mother laugh like that in the last 20 years. And she wanted to be a part of this. All of them are still alive. When we look at our history, we start to write about it, but the descendants are still here. My mother's memoir is a part of this document. So please do not forget those retired teachers that are still alive, that taught the teachers each other to get around him through Sarah V. Jones. So please consider them as well. And thank you for your vote tonight.
Thank you all. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be careful, okay? Yeah. Yeah, I'm good.
My apologies. I know there's lots of warmth and celebration in the room, but we did not go into recess. So.
St. Patrick's Day out there.
I just had to scramble for this.
Oh my gosh.
And we are back. Before we move on to section 5, I just wanted to take a moment. Though we had no formal recognitions prepared for this evening, there is something the board did want to mention. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tobin.
Yes, I just briefly thought that we should recognize an incredible accomplishment by one of our great partners in this county. Many already know at this point that Anne Arundel Community College was named the best community college in the country on the Forbes list.
Yep.
They are, of course, an incredible partner with AACPS. We are fortunate that our students have the opportunity to attend the best community college in the country, which we've known for a long time. And I just wanted to say that I thought we should offer them congratulations. And so congratulations.
Congratulations indeed. I think it'd be great sometime to have a presentation on our partnership with AACC. And parents, if you're listening, talk to your students. I mean, what an incredible option we have in this county to get that start at the next level for students. So thank you for mentioning that. And now we are on section 5, consent items, award of contracts, beginning with 5.01 energy management control system programming.
President Ellis,
Yes.
motion to bundle items 5.01 to 5.07.
Second.
Can I make a friendly amendment and request 5.01 to 5.06?
Friendly amendment?
No.
I assume that.
Well, there's a member who would like to, I think, discuss that one separately. So
Sure.
would you like to bundle 5.01 to 5.06?
Sure. Yeah. I'm done.
Second. Yeah.
Do I have consensus?
Yes.
No dissent. All right. So items 5.01 to 5.06. Dr. Arlotto?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I recommend that the Board of Education authorize the award of the contracts as listed on today's agenda, 5.01 through 5.06.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. A motion and a second. I'm gonna visually go around first. Do we need to go around? Any questions or discussion? Okay, so we will vote on items 5.01 to 5.06. Ms. Howe?
Ms. Frank? Aye. Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Antwine?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Now we are on item 5.07, Student Transportation Consulting Services. Dr. Alato?
Thank you, Madam President. I recommend the Board of Education authorize the award of contract number 21S-257, Student Transportation Consulting Services to Prismatic Services Incorporated in the total amount of $105,920.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We'll go around for questions or discussion. Oh, no worries. So Ms. Frank, Ms. Corkadell, anything?
Yeah, I just, I did have one or two questions just for staff. Because this, of course, is not something that we originally anticipated in our budget. And so I just wondered if staff could maybe share just sort of a fiscal snapshot of how, where the money where the money's coming from and what it's going, a little bit more about the fiscal impact on that.
Sure. Let me begin, Ms. Corkadell. I'm Alex Shaknovich, Chief Operating Officer, and I'll make a couple introductory remarks, and then Matt Stansky, the Director of Financial Operations, will bring up the other half of the conversation. So we have analyzed the contract and believe it's fiscally sound and prudent to do so. COVID's provided us with some challenges, as we know, fiscally, and it's created areas where we expended and areas where we have overexpended. And this would fall into some of the areas we have underexpended. As you know, the way the appropriation budget process works is that the monies are dispensed to us within the 15 categorical areas as defined with state law. And then within that, the superintendent board have discretion on how to operate within the confines, again, of those parameters that are established by state law to the extent that they don't exceed an individual state category appropriation authority first or the budget in total. So that's the analysis we did. And then specific to the financial arena, Mr. Stansky, I'll turn the balance over to you.
Yeah, so this, along with every contract that comes before the board, it's a review from my office to ensure available funding in the categories in which Mr. Shaknovich described. And so, like with this, knowing that it wasn't originally planned for, we did an analysis of the categories and felt that given the current spending patterns, we could absorb the cost of the contract without having to go to the council for additional appropriation authority.
Okay, thank you so much. And so this is going to give us a hand on achieving some of our in particular, our most recent board directive on start times, correct? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. The Board of Education, I believe it was on the 20th of January, took a vote providing some parameters and direction to the superintendent and his team. So in partnership with the consultant, we're going to analyze the plan in a two-step process. First, there's going to be a proof of concept or a viability study. This is going to be step one. We will brief out to the board at the conclusion of phase one. And then assuming that it's favorable and the board is accepting of the term and conditions and the preliminary findings of phase one, then we will move into step two, and I'll loosely call it implementation, more of an implementation phase then that will make the analysis actionable down to the change of the start times and the stop reconfigurations, et cetera. So it's going to be a two-step process. The board will have involvement transitioning and essentially given a go-ahead between phase one and phase two, and then again clearly at the end of phase 2 when we bring the finished product back to the board for their review and green light. That's the work plan for the project.
So presuming should the board choose to move forward with it, when do we estimate the NTP to occur?
Ms. Childs and the contractor typically can get that executed in a week's time. Clearly, we have a lot of control over our end, but most consultants are pretty ready to go as well. And one of the processes that we go through is always confirming availability of capacity. When we vet any vendor, any contractor, we will not enter into a contract with a vendor that has not demonstrated to us that they've got the capacity within the scope of their entity to take on the work. So they've avowed to us that they are ready, they do have the capacity to do the work. And I believe it's really just exchanging some insurance certificates, some signatures, some, de rigueur, purchasing activities, but it should get underway very quickly, it would be my presumption.
Okay. So the other aspects, I just want to make sure it's clear, the other aspects of the Prismatics recommendation is not part of this scope. This is an adjunct to that. And so we'll still need to be addressing some of the other, such as the position recommendations, the state audits recommendations, the prismatic ones.
Yes,
as
ma'am.
well, right?
And those are not part of the scope of work for this. This is more uniquely tailored to the motion that the board made at its January meeting.
Mhm.
The other elements are under the purview of the superintendent, staff, my transportation division, et
Okay.
cetera.
But the monies we weren't going from one to the other. I mean, if there were any.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so we can still continue on the path that we have been working on
Absolutely,
currently
yes.
on that. Okay. Thank you very much. I have no more questions.
Ms. Antoine?
Thank you, Mr. Shagnovitz and Dr. Alato, for this introduction ahead of time. Based on what you shared tonight, many of my questions actually have been answered, and I thank you for it. And I thank you for introducing the need for support before, not after the fact situation, but you're proactive about it. So thank you.
Yeah, again, this is a big lift for the organization, and it's not one that we want to make unilaterally, right? I mean, the board and the administration, we all need ownership of this, and the way we structured a contract very purposefully was to have a checkpoint in the middle to basically come back with information, make sure that everybody's comfortable with that it aligns with the intention of the board and complies with the intent of the motion. One specific example I'll bring out to you, Ms. Antoine, if one was to go back and read the minutes or review the tape, probably more better, of that meeting, remember the board said, well, there may need to be some flexibility, right? Your motion was very specific, right? Like a rigid time, but your words also said, well, we may need to move things 5 minutes here or there, to make the math work, right? To make the algorithm work. But we don't want to be presumptuous in that. So we want to come back to you to the extent that it doesn't exactly align, right? If something needs to give 5 minutes one way or 10 minutes the other way, well, we want to be transparent about that, right? We want to come back to you and say, okay, this is what you said. This is what we can do, we think. Are you comfortable with that, right? So that's why we structured a contract to have a checkpoint in the middle to sort of, test, make sure we're all okay before we move on to the heavier the back half lift of the project, which is really the routing and the detailed work to follow.
Thank you for that explanation as well, Mr. Shagnovitz. I'm definitely in support of what I'm seeing here. At first, I have to admit, I thought we're asking people to do the jobs that you all are in place to do. But the more information I get, the better decision I can make in support of the contract. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Silkworth?
Yes, thank you, President Ellis. I have to say, when I first saw this, I had some concerns, as Ms. Corkadell did, and maybe some others. But I did my due diligence as a board member. I want to thank Mr. Saknovich and his staff for the explanation. I will be voting in favor of this contract. I have to say, I'm very anxious to see and hear the proposal that will come as a result of this contract. Everybody knows my position, I think, about start times. I do believe that there are later start times based on certain parameters are important and essential. Safety for our students and the overall wellness of our students will be impacted perhaps by this. And so I just want to make sure I did go back and I did read the Prismatic report. And the Prismatic report does make some comments about start times. It makes some recommendations. I can remember back in the fall, I had concerns about some of those recommendations in terms of safety issues. So having said that, hopefully we'll get some answers from this and we'll be able to move forward in the appropriate manner for the overall wellness of our students. Thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Stricknovich, Mr. Stansky, and Ms. Childs, nice to meet you. Thank you all for your report, and I have no questions.
Yes, thank you for your work and for your work working with Prismatic to get us to this point. And to dovetail on what we heard earlier about the wellness lens, you know, the real fiscal note of doing this work to get us to healthier, safe, age-appropriate start times is the wellness of our children, the mental health and physical safety of our children. So I don't think it'd be any surprise to anybody that I'm absolutely in support of this, and I thank you all for your work getting us to this point. Much appreciated.
Thank you, and I'll just I want to thank you for bringing this before us. Thank you, Ms. Childs, for being here to answer any questions. I don't have any questions. I fully support. I see this again back to the wellness lens, not only as another piece of the pavement, another stone on the path to healthy start times, but I see enhancements in our transportation system that also will positively impact our students. So I'm very much in favor, and I thank you, Dr. Arlotto, for looking for solutions. I appreciate it. Okay, I think, Ms. Frank? Oh,
Ready to vote?
oh, okay. Ms. Howell?
Ms. Frank?
Aye.
Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Antoine?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0. Ms. Ellis, your microphone is not on.
Do I have to repeat that? Okay. Item 6.01, administrative personnel appointments. Dr. Alon.
President Ellis, motion to bundle items 6.01 to 6.04.
Second.
Is that? Okay. Do we have consensus on that? Okay. Item 6.01 to 6.04. Dr. Arlotto.
Not sure how to take that.
I
so
know,
I'm
I'm gonna be honest.
Let me start with 6.01. There are no administrative personnel appointments.
Right.
And I will certainly recommend that the board approve the stormwater management inspection maintenance agreement for Hillsmere Elementary School, as well as the Forest Conservation Declaration covenants, conditions, and restrictions at Hillsmere Elementary School, as well as I'll seek board approval of the Forest Conservation Declaration covenants, conditions, and restrictions at Old Mill West High School.
Move to approve the superintendent's recommendations.
Second.
Board questions or discussion? All right, Ms. Howell?
Ms. Frank? Aye. Dr. Tobin?
Aye.
Ms. Corkadell?
Aye.
Ms. Antoine?
Aye.
Mr. Silkworth?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Schallheim?
Aye.
Ms. Ellis?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Item 6.05, items of legislation. Good evening, Ms. Ortiz.
Good evening. For the record, Jeanette Ortiz, Legislative and Policy Counsel. I do not have any bills for you to vote on this evening. However, there are a few in Section 3 that fall under the board's legislative program, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
I will go down the line in case there's questions, Ms. Frank.
I do not have questions on what we have in our packet. Thank you again for, now every time I look at this, I make sure I find the fiscal impact, and I'm absolutely find it every time. So I appreciate that. I did just want to go back to the transportation bill. I think that's really relevant with the motion we just passed tonight too. I saw that it passed the House and another version passed the Senate pretty well. I just did not have a chance to hunt down the amendments. Did you ever get a chance to see what happened amendment-wise?
So I did email the board like the next day,
Oh,
I believe.
I didn't
So I can resend that if you didn't. Off the top of my head, I cannot recall what the amendments were specifically to the bills. However, we did not have concerns with them
Okay,
that I
maybe
remember.
maybe it was just a,
Yeah.
it was fine, and yeah.
I know you guys get lots of emails, but yeah, if you don't, so I think our last meeting was March 3rd, so maybe March 4th. But if you do not find it, I'll just, when I go back to my office, I'll just resend it.
Yeah, I actually don't see it.
I hope it's not sitting in my drafts. 'Cause it was a nice, it was a very,
Yeah.
it was a nice explanation. Okay.
Yeah,
I got it.
I'm not. But so yeah, if you could resend that to me, I'd appreciate it. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Tobin.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Ms. Ortiz. Good to see
evening.
you. I have one question, a couple of small questions about the packet you sent. The companion bill for the blueprint,
Yes.
HB 1372, SB 965. There's reference to changes to the Accountability and Implementation Board. Can you elaborate a little bit on what those changes are that have been made in the companion legislation?
Yeah, so I brought the bill with me.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
I definitely don't remember everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to do really with how the members are selected of the board. So when the governor will appoint, I think now the governor receives like a slate of individuals to select from. Let me just double check here. Da, da, da. Yeah, it's a slate. And the governor has to appoint the members within 30 days now. There's some like date changes. There's like a nominating committee language and how that would work is added. And looks like I'm going to make sure I'm looking at the right board here because there are other
I know,
lots of entities in this
Yeah.
bill. Yeah, that's pretty much
Okay.
it. It was just fine tuning the appointment process of
Okay.
the governor.
I was just, I didn't think I'd heard anything about any significant change
No,
to their function or what they do, just.
Yeah, no, the function essentially remains the same. Oversight. Certainly, one of the things we're all, when I say we, my colleagues and I and some other stakeholders are trying to better understand is how the accountability board intersects with the state board and the State Department of Education and the governor's inspector general and the
Right.
comptroller has an inspector general. So, they will I'm sure, work that all out.
Mhm.
But yes, their function and the purpose of the accountability board is the same.
Okay, all right, thank you. And another quick question on HB 1376, the primary and secondary educational, the virtual ed requirements bill. There's reference to a flip the classroom pilot program. I hadn't heard of that before, and I was just curious what that is.
Yeah, me neither. That's a great question. It's basically, and so again, we did a letter of information because it's not mandating us. It's all voluntary. However, if you volunteered to participate, then you must
Right.
follow certain things. And so that's why we kind of had some questions and concerns that we wanted to raise. But the Flip the Classroom program, from my understanding, and Dr. Lotto, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of asynchronous learning, and it's just allowing the teacher to record a lesson for a student to be able to watch the lesson at a later point in time. Something that, teachers can do now with different platforms, but this is a particular platform that is utilized in education.
Okay, all right. Because I'm familiar with the notion of a flipped classroom, right? That the homework gets done in the class, so to speak, and the lecture or whatever is outside of class. But this is just in the virtual setting that they're talking about.
Yeah, it's in the
piloting that.
virtual
Okay.
setting, and
Okay.
yeah. Yes.
All righty. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Corkadell? Ms. Antwine?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Silkworth?
No questions. It's great to see you. Great job.
Great
Thank
to
you
see
so
you
much.
too. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
As always, thank you, Ms. Ortiz. I have no questions. I just want to let you know that I'll be serving my second week as a page next week. So if you,
Yeah, you.
I know, I wish we got 3 weeks, but only give us 2. But if you do happen to testify, maybe I might be watching. So
Okay, I try not to do that if I don't have to. Try to give substantive written testimony.
Yes.
But I will say that, I do participate in the subcommittee meetings, and, we got an Ortiz amendment on a bill yesterday that was helping, and it had to do with the hate symbols legislation. It's so funny because Mary Pat Fanning, she's the executive director of PASAM, the Public School Superintendent Association of Maryland. She's texting me, "Oh, the Ortiz amendment, you should, put that on your resume." Not that I'm updating my resume, but
Please don't.
so don't yell at Mary Pat. But it was but it had to do with the hate symbols legislation, and there was concern about, they wanted to know, like, oh, are you going to suspend a student who wears a hate symbol? And so I was able to, they asked for advocate feedback. So I raised my hand on Zoom. We have to keep our cameras off, and we can't raise our hand unless they ask us to in this committee, in the subcommittee. And so I was able to kind of explain how our student code of conduct works. And it was when we deal with dress code infractions, like, the students give an opportunity to change, right, the attire. If it's a symbol of hate, remove the symbol of hate, that sort of thing. I think folks were thinking there was going to be suspension and things of that nature. And, I explained, obviously, if it's a reoccurring issue and there's the student's defiant or something escalates, that's handled differently. Anyway, I gave them some suggested language to assist, and it was a unanimous vote out of the subcommittee. So I think the Ortiz amendment helped with that.
Ms. Ortiz, it's wonderful to see you smiling here this evening.
It's early, so I'm like, great.
Yeah, we're getting better. We're working. Oh, I've skipped Ms. Schallheim again.
It's twice tonight.
I forgot where we started because
Yeah.
most of this end is done, and I forgot.
Yeah,
My
no worries.
apologies.
I actually did have a question though.
Yeah.
About the blueprint. So my question is more about funding for the blueprint. Can you remind us, please, how that works? Because there was something interesting that came up in budget committee the other day, and I think Mr. Shagnovich remembers, and I want to tie some ends together and see where we land on this. So what, can you remind me how this is going to be funded, or was another funding source created by taking away from another funding source? I just want to know what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, I can start, chime in, cut me off if I'm saying wrong things. But essentially, so the blueprint is funded through state and local funding. And, it's a 10-year plan. And so initially, the legislature anticipated that the first, I think, 3 years would be paid for. However, now that we've received some federal funds for COVID relief, and there's been some funding for education purposes, there is special section language that's uncodified in the legislation that basically requires school systems to use some of that education funding to address some, like for tutoring and supplemental instruction to deal with learning loss. And sorry, I'm looking at all my highlighted sections here. There's, dealing funds, federal funds for different things that they've identified in the bill. So I think the legislature is thinking that we should be using some of this federal funding to also help move forward the blueprint legislation and the requirements set forth, in the new law. And so I don't know if they're thinking there might be state shortfalls. Alex may be able to weigh in on that.
We are going through, Alex Checkno, Chief Operating Officer, we are going to have to report in both 2021 and 2022, create a report to the state agency and the General Assembly about the use of our federal funds in support of the enumerated sections of the blueprint bill that align with the law. So we're not only encouraged to spend the funds in that specified way, encouraged, not required, encouraged, but there is a report out function both for 2021 and 2022 in that regard.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, that's what it talks about, the reporting requirements and how we use federal funding and state funding, to meet these, meet the blueprint goals.
I understand that was unexpected. Does that, I know when the blueprint was conceived, I think part of the rationale, please correct me if I'm wrong, was that it would supplement, not supplant. Same with like the lockbox stuff. And so
yes,
does that sort of borrowing from the feds to pay for the state wonderful blueprint, is that what they're trying to achieve? Is there any worry on your side? I guess that's my real question. Is there any worry on your side or from the school system side about the use of federal monies to pay for provisions in the blueprint?
Let Alex take that
Sure.
one.
In general, I'll say no because the federal regulations prevail. And so we are always going to have to be compliant with all of the governing provisions of the granting authority, and the federal provisions prevail over a state authority. So the state cannot compel us to spend the federal dollars in an inappropriate or impermissible fashion. So I have zero concern that we will do that. We are very diligent about making sure that we comply with all of the restricted grant requirements. Remember that all grant funding is also subject to a high degree of scrutiny and audit as well. So we are going to, as always we do, be very dutiful to make sure that we don't trip over any of those expenditure restrictions.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Alex just stated. And I think the General Assembly is just thinking, oh, we're getting all of this federal funding, and obviously we have to spend it in accordance with what the federal government is requiring, how they are requiring us to spend this money. There's alignment there in what the blueprint is seeking to accomplish with this education policy overhaul in the state. And so I think that was sort of the thought behind this language.
I really appreciate the clarification because when when we talked about it briefly, and yes, we try to keep our budget committee meetings as brief as possible. It was a little bit of a head scratcher to me, and because I'm just the lay person, I wanted to seek that clarification. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
I will also say, though, that remember, if we go back in time, right, it was largely contemplated that early on, much of the blueprint efforts were going to be funded by monies yielded through the casino and the gaming industry. And with some of the shutdowns and health-related restrictions, there's not been the level of revenue attainment through some of those sources that were contemplated. So I think there is some encouragement to not lose ground or, not lose speed in terms of implementation of the blueprint to the extent that the federal funds, again, can help support that while the revenue and casino gaming, revenues pick back up to where they were previously anticipated, then there wouldn't be any sort of delay in reaching the goals that the Kerwin Commission laid out for the blueprint bill.
Yeah, that clarification is very, very helpful. So thank you for that. And that is in no way, I love the blueprint. Let's go. Like, let's get going on it. And, so it wasn't about that. I just had the question about, the various.
But it was very surprising that was not
Right, because
that
that
was
had not
not
been previously
telegraphed
discussed.
to anybody.
No, and not
So-
even in all of the, we've met with leadership, with
Right.
committee chairs, with the speaker, the Senate president. That was not previously communicated. So when this dropped last week, we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so it turns out that it's an okay thing then, like they found a way to be creative to make all of this work and keep the train moving. So that's good. Great, thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
I want to thank you, Ms. Ortiz, for putting together the board's position on House Bill 1013. I appreciate.
Oh, yes,
your
you're
work
very
on that.
welcome. Yep, I was able to submit that timely, and I watched the bill hearing on that, and this is the daylight saving legislation that was discussed at the last meeting. And so, there were several folks up that testified in opposition, and so I'm tracking it with all hundreds of other bills.
Right. Thank you for that.
Can I ask one more question?
Okay.
So does that, I heard that there might be an amendment to do permanent standard time. It still doesn't have legs though, right? Or does it now? If they were to amend it in that way?
So I don't think it does because it's such a significant change after a year of significant changes. I'm not sure that the legislature wants to go there this year, maybe in out years where there's been more time to consider the statewide impacts of whether you went standard time or daylight saving, right? There's a major impact across the state in a variety of different ways. And so I have not heard that, but I am tracking it, in the event that something unexpected happens, because in Annapolis, in my 16 sessions there, things happen sometimes. Deals are brokered and, who knows, but I do not believe it will go anywhere.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. And hopefully you will get out of here nice and early as well.
Yeah. And now we are on section 7, review items. Item 7.01, 2020-21 reopening update. Dr. Arlotto.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As always, delighted to give you a quick, brief update on where we are with regard to our reopening. Through the first 2 weeks of implementing our hybrid learning plan, we have successfully reintroduced roughly 22,500 students into our schools. We now have students engaged in in-person learning at all levels, elementary, middle, and high schools, as well as at our centers of applied technology, developmental centers, ED regional centers, Mary Moss at J. Albert Adams, as well as the Phoenix Academy. On March 22nd, we will welcome our 7th 8th, 10th, and 11th graders to the we will welcome those hybrid students back to their school buildings. Our school-based staffs have been nothing short of amazing, and they are engaging their students, both in person and those virtual, in very meaningful learning. Our vaccine clinics continue to move forward. We've conducted 5 vaccine clinics for AACPS personnel, vaccinating roughly 7,227 staff members. We will have our 6th clinic tomorrow, Thursday, March 18th. All AACPS staff that requested to be vaccinated with us have been vaccinated. The next several clinics will focus on second dose distribution. The COVID-19 data dashboard is up and running and being updated each week. Since returning to in-person instruction on March 1, we've had 44 positive cases in our schools, 32 students and 12 staff members, including athletics. Our contact tracing team is working many long hours, as is Mr. Mosier, and maintaining nearly constant contact with our Department of Health. To date, none of the cases have been a result of spread in our schools. Our students and staff are doing a fantastic job of wearing their masks, maintaining appropriate distancing, good hand hygiene, and our building service team are keeping the buildings clean and disinfected. We must maintain our vigilance. As you know, athletics is underway, and our fall sports competitions begin the week of March 22nd. We're working with our Department of Health, finally, to develop an in-school COVID testing program for students and staff in the school setting that are symptomatic or asymptomatic, but a close contact of a known positive case. We have received test kits from MSDE and the Maryland Department of Health and are finalizing that implementation plan with the Anne Arundel County Department of Health. And with that, I'm glad to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Arlotto. And before we do take questions, I just want to make a quick statement. So we've just passed the 1-year mark that our schools had been closed. And I think we just beat the anniversary by getting our schools back open. And so I just want to take a moment. This has been a very tough road. It's been a tough road for our students. It's been a tough road for our teachers. It's been a tough road for our staff. Dr. Arlotto, I know you and your team have been working nonstop this entire year as we take on all of these challenges. The pandemic did not just bring one challenge. There's so many moving parts to work out to get to offer our students an education. So I want to focus on the positive because when I think back over the last year, here's the highlights that come to mind for me. Beginning with meals, serving our students around the county, serving them within days of closing our doors. It's just a phenomenal effort. 1-to-1 student to Chromebook ratio, something that was not planned and something that became achievable this year. And I believe the students who truly needed them had them very, very quickly to allow education to continue. Another highlight that sticks out for me, the virtual platform. Virtual learning is not ideal, but it is doable. It at least got us by through a year, and we've learned a lot from it. And it now is a new tool that we have that we didn't have before for a variety of circumstances that could impact our students. The vaccine clinics. I was able to witness the very first vaccine clinic, the positive energy, the excitement among all of the volunteers there, our partners, the fire department, but the teachers and staff walking through that door just had the most excited, positive energy. That was just an amazing effort. And it has been beautifully run. And now every teacher and staff member who has wanted a vaccine has had the opportunity to receive their first. And we have begun second doses. And then finally, our students back in the classroom. The absolute highlight of my year. Every day that I open up my laptop and look at my inbox, the heartfelt, very personal stories of thanks and excitement for getting students back into the classroom. There's just nothing like it. And so all of this happened, Dr. Arlotto, under your leadership. And so I would like to speak, I believe, for my colleagues and offer our gratitude and our support for what you're doing to lead us through this time. Thank you.
May I?
Absolutely.
So thank you. I'd like to say that I'm speechless, but my team knows that's not possible. So I do very much appreciate that support, but it is the recognition for this team that has been, there are 4 of the key team members before this board now, and they represent an incredible team that has worked morning, noon, and night. I was on a meeting earlier today, and as is Ms. Jackson does many times as the historian, as we delve into meetings and topics, helps us remind us of history. And she reminded us today as we began a meeting, my COVID team, as we have called ourselves, and we have met every Wednesday for the past year to talk about every aspect of the school system and how we adapt and overcome. And she reminded us that it was a year ago this week that as schools had closed, we were recording TV lessons for students. Many of us were coming into the TV studio to read stories, and teachers were recording lessons that we could push out asynchronously because, and our amazing TV crew and team did a phenomenal job. But it reminds me, as you were, and thank you, Mrs. Ellis, so eloquently, those highlights for you over the past year, I put those two together and say how far we have come in a very short period of time. And we've come that far because of people. And people want to make a difference for children each and every day in the school system, and that makes a difference. And we've got our families that were willing to offer their grace and patience as we built this, that our students did similarly to offer their grace and patience to understand that their teachers were going through something new and different. And we've come together as certainly a stronger community, and no question that as we open our doors next year to our students, we'll be a stronger school system as a result of all of this that has gone on and continues to go on. We'll continue to learn from it. It's okay to say we don't know. We are a bit perfectionists, so we've struggled with those words that we don't know, but we've come to grips with what we don't know and what we now need to figure out on behalf of our students and our staffs who've just done a phenomenal job. So thank you for that support. It means a great deal to me, means a great deal to my team. And we still have lots of good work to do. So thank you.
And with that, we'll start with any questions or comments on the reopening. Ms. Frank.
I did, in your report, you mentioned the in-school COVID tests. Can you elaborate on that at all?
Yes, ma'am. So I've mentioned it a couple of times. It's so the state of Maryland, through the MSDE and the Maryland Department of Health, have supplied school systems with rapid tests and PCR tests. So the quick test and the longer test. They've supplied kits to us with implementation instructions. Each local school system in the state has to find a medical partner. We're not licensed to do that kind of work, obviously. So each school system is required to find a medical partner to work together to create a testing program that can occur inside the schools. And so, of course, our Department of Health, Dr. Kalyana Raman and his team jumped at the opportunity. We have a team from AACPS that meets regularly with the team from the Department of Health to work out all the specifics to make sure that we are ready. In short, our school nurses will be administering tests as needed in the school building. So it could be a student or a staff member during the course of the day that becomes symptomatic. It could also be somebody that during the course of the day has been declared a close contact. While they might be asymptomatic, they are declared a close contact of a positive case, and they could be tested as well. So this is not testing for the community where the community can line up outside and get tested. This is school-based, and we've been given these tests. They're at the warehouse. We're distributing them to the schools. We're learning some things about the medical industry that we've not had to deal with, like when you do testing, you have to have biohazard waste removal. Well, we don't have that in our schools. We will soon. Mr. Shaknovich and his team has been working with the Department of Health, and we're piggybacking on a contract to bring in a biomedical waste management disposal unit so that we can do the tests and have those wastes taken care of. Likewise, when the PCR tests are finished, you have to have a delivery mechanism that FedEx picks up the specimens and takes them to the lab, and we're having to work out that. So we're close. All that's being worked out. Once it's in place and it's gotten the blessing of not only our Department of Health, but the Maryland Department of Health is monitoring all the steps along the way for each school system. We'll then begin to administer the tests inside our schools.
And I assume that is meant for staff and students, correct?
Yes, it's staff and students, correct.
Okay. Now, do we have any ideas on what consent for a test like this would look like?
So there has to be consent. There have to be legal documents. There has to be consent of the parent for the child to be tested at school.
Is it the nurse would just call the parent and that is fine for consent? Or are we having a written record of this as well? What does that look like?
So that's a great question. We will have to have a written record.
Okay.
Whether we have to wait for the parent to arrive to sign that record, or we can move forward with a verbal permission. Great question. Don't know yet.
Okay.
More. We're learning along the way.
That's fine.
Great question. These are things that we're struggling.
Yeah. a
Absolutely.
little nervous to make sure that we keep track of that and just make sure that parents are that we have it firmly and that we can, in case there are any concerns or problems later, that we have it in writing if we can. I don't know how that would look, but obviously, just bring it up. Okay. Great.
Yes.
That's the only questions and considerations I have for the reopening report. But again, just thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And like President Ellis said, this is exciting for us to tell our constituents, we're moving forward, and it's awesome. Thank you.
It is indeed, in a word, awesome. No question.
Dr. Tobin.
Yes, thank you. And so I take it from this, Dr. Arlotto, that should you ever get tired of the education game, you could run a hospital someday.
I have my doctorate, but I don't have that doctorate.
Okay, I have just a couple of small questions, things that have come up from some parents. Obviously, we heard earlier some parents who are concerned at the prospect of additional changes down the road. Obviously, we don't know about that, but I have heard from a few parents who have children who are with special needs, who really are not finding support in the centers they're in to do virtual work on the 2 days they're not in. And in all these cases, these are very small classes, like the total class might be 5 or 6. So questions have come up about, well, is there any way that these children with particular special education needs could find a way to do 4 days in the school rather than just the 2? Do you see any way forward with that down the line for families in that kind of situation?
Absolutely. So when I talk about and reference moving to 4 days a week, that's the group that we will focus on first. One, because of their needs, and we know we can better serve them than when they're with us under our roof during those 4 days, as opposed to the virtual. But also because, as you said, appropriately so, the numbers are small. And so we do believe that we can begin to bring them in 4 days a week. So that will be the group that we'll focus on first in expanding their time with us inside the class.
Okay, excellent. I assumed that was probably the case, but several of these cases have come to my attention. And so I would hope that we really would hone in on those students before there were any consideration of others. And let me see, there was something else. Well, first of all, I would also just like to say, and you appropriately noted, Dr. Arlotto, in your opening remarks, but it's so fabulous that students who opted for hybrid are back in hybrid. But just a reminder, the teachers are doing extraordinary work, and virtual has been extraordinary for a lot of kids and continues to be, frankly, for the majority of our students as of now. And so in the excitement of getting everybody back into the building who has chosen hybrid, I just want to remember that, learning has been happening in the virtual environment. Teachers have been doing extraordinary things, and just to give my thanks for that, because I think that continues to deserve real recognition. Also, a couple of questions we've received, or I've received, about, and this is really about thinking about the schedule for next year. We now have, for those students who are those 6th graders and 9th graders who are choosing to remain virtual all year, they will never have been in their buildings. And so there is a question as to whether or not for those rising 7th and 9th and 10th graders, can there also be an orientation day for them in the fall, as we normally do for 6th graders and 9th graders, because we'll have these categories of students who really have never been in their school buildings.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one several of your colleagues have asked. I've had a number of conversations with parents who have emailed me as well and asked the same question. So would I say we would do a traditional orientation as you have suggested? No, I would say we would not, because we'd then be taking separate days for just the 6th graders, and then I'd send them home. Then I'm going to do just the 7th graders, and then I would send them home. What we're really thinking about is, holistically, as we bring the students back in, what the first, and Dr. McMahon and I were having this conversation yesterday afternoon, that maybe the first 2 weeks of school are just going to look very different than they have in the past to get to this very piece. That we don't have to jump right into physics or whatever the grade level or content is, that we really need to reacclimate students to not only their new school, if they're new to it, but to schooling. And moving about a building and carrying a backpack and putting on something other than pajamas or whatever it might be. But we have to reacclimate. And so that's the conversation that the fall planning teams are already undertaking to say that will be part of the mix. How do the first couple weeks of school look? And how do we do those orientations without isolating a group of students? Because I could still do an orientation for 6th graders with 7th and 8th graders in the building at the same time, right? And move them about the building. And we can do that for several weeks because we really have to think differently about students getting used to doing school again. And that's part of the planning that has already started and that we will undertake very seriously going into the fall.
I'm very glad to hear that because that does seem to me to make a whole lot of sense. And in line with the CAC report we got, I think really what it means to bring the whole child back to the whole school is going to be more complex and potentially maybe the way we should always start school. But I'm glad to hear that. And I have one last very small question. We've had some questions about the current virtual schedule for elementary students, and that there's apparently a 2-hour block in the afternoon where students don't get a break from the screen. And this is very, 2nd graders and so on. I just wondered if there'd been any discussion of that, any opportunities for breaks. Is that left to the discretion of the teacher?
It is. Yes, it is left to the discretion of the teacher, just like they would in brick and mortar, how they want to divide up their day, particularly during that afternoon period. I don't know if there's anything you want to share, Dr. McMahon, regarding that, but it's really up to the teacher and what the students' needs are. And if they want to develop and build in a break, they certainly can do that. It's up to the teacher.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, can you hear me? Yep. Yes? Okay. It is up to the teacher, as Dr. Arlotto said, and the nice part about it is the teachers really ask us. They said, let it be organic, because some classrooms, depending on the students of the day, they need a break after 35 minutes, and others can go basically into 45 minutes. So we have basically 35 or 40-minute blocks in that day, depending if you're young in the primary years or if you're intermediate. But the nature of that afternoon is the teachers can take the breaks when they need them based on the students' needs. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Ms. Corkdale?
I don't have a question, but I did want to piggyback off of Member Tobin's couple comments on mental, social, emotional well-being of our students. And I think we would be remiss not to thank Ms. Jackson, Dr. Arlotto, Ms. Meigler, Mr. Vogelin, and so many others of the panelists, our partners, our partnership with our partners. So many of them have been going above and beyond. Our mobile crisis unit, Jen and Steve, awesome folks. And and last but not least, a very courageous student that's a member of our CRASC organization, willing to share his story and his challenges. So I just wanted to thank you all, because this really is part of reopening is our social emotional well-being. And I think we're off to a really good start and a foundation. I'd love to get those conversations into that prevention pocket as soon as possible, because that's where we want our kids to be, preventing. But we have a lot of mitigation work to do and a heavy lift to climb for not just our students, but of our employees and so many members of our community. And I think it was an awesome conversation. So many people I know shared in my communities and continue to share that information. And I know that there is more planned in the future, and I look forward to supporting that and being a part of it too. Thanks, guys. Very greatly appreciated.
Ms. Antwine?
Thank you. I Dr. Tobin clearly had my notepad with my questions. So that left me with none. But I did want to ask with one of the testimonies today pointed out we have 63 days left of school. Are there current plans for similar actions as we did last year for summer school?
There are, we will, in terms of the planning and what we plan to bring and offer in terms of opportunities to students, will far surpass what we did last summer and what we've done in the past. We have a summer planning team under Dr. McMahon's leadership that have been working on what our summer will look like. We have also, we will be, as I have reported to the board, the CARES 2 funding that became available to the states and soon the locals back in December. We will have possibly access to $48 million that's been earmarked for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. We don't have that money yet. We have to write a grant to the Maryland State Department of Education to access that money. That grant team is underway. That's money that can be spent through the next 3 years, and it will primarily, we'll be able to spend it in a couple of key places, but primarily focusing on the needs of students and engaging them in summer work and tutoring and programming during the school year. So this summer is really going to be about developing programs, and since it was part of the conversation earlier today, the whole child. And what I mean by that as an example is where I might invite you in the past to a summer program because you're behind in your middle school math. And I might ask you to come in and do 2 hours of middle school math a couple of days a week. Well, now we want to build a program on that that's around an entire day. So it could be some middle school math, and it could be some really cool, fun, engaging things, outdoors, indoors. It could be sports related. It could be the arts related. We have, we are involving partners at Maryland Hall, at the police department, in our Department of Recreation and Parks, and Chesapeake Center for the Arts are all working with us to combine to build programs for our students for this summer, really engaging programming for our students this summer. And much of that will be, we'll be able to utilize this federal funding that is coming our way.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Arlotto.
Yes, ma'am.
Silkworth?
Thank you, President Ellis. Dr. Tobin also had some of my comments, and I thank you for that. But I'm going to repeat them simply because Dr. Tobin talked about.
Well, why don't we in the future, I'll just have a phone conversation with Dr. Tobin before the meeting.
That could
and
be.
We'll just save ourselves a whole bunch of time. How's that?
Well, she talked about the greatness that we all know that we've seen as a result of what our teachers and staff during this pandemic. I have to tell you, and I know my colleagues will agree, that the emails that we have been receiving since the opening have been amazing, heart-wrenching. The stories that our parents are telling us about the difference in their lives and in the lives of their children. It's unbelievable. And they're thanking us. So I'm looking out there into the TV land to the teachers and staff that are out there, and I'm saying I wish you could see and read the emails that I read, because even though they're thanking me, I'm passing it on to you. The greatness that we have in our teachers, we see it each and every day. The physical and mental wellness of our students is in great hands. And so many of our students are thriving. But you know what? We're still in uncharted territory. Everyone out there needs to know we, me, this board, this superintendent, we are listening to you. I want teachers and staff that are out there to know that I support you, as I have always. I want you to know that this Board of Education, my colleagues, they support you. And we've shown that. I also want you to know that Dr. Arlotto, this superintendent, supports you in ways that you don't even understand. We all appreciate everything that you have done, and we know you're going to continue to do greatness. And I'm going to say to all of my colleagues, it is time to come together, to collaborate, to unify as we begin this process of asking our county council and our county executive to fund a budget that came from Dr. Alata and this board that definitely supports the needs of our staff. So I thank you.
Mr. Smith.
Yes, I just want to say first, I concur with everything my colleagues have been saying, because I have experienced hybrid firsthand. I will tell you, it feels so nice to be back in the building. When Dr. Law was talking about orientation, our students gonna know what regular school feels like. I commented to one of my friends, this feels weird, right? It's amazing how we were in here day in and day out for 11 and a half years, but now it's so odd to us. So, it was an adjustment, but it was a most welcomed adjustment. And like I said, I'm just so happy to be back, especially for my favorite class, lunch. I do enjoy French cuisine, so oui. But speaking of that, also, on the Wednesdays, I will tell you that I'm feeling very, very well rested today. I'm sure a lot of my fellow students are, because we moved the time back to 8:30. So I really want to thank you for that, Dr. Arlato. I was very welcome too. Well, I just do have a few questions, and they're actually one of them is actually related to lunch. So the lunches, we can't sing enough praises for our meal service staff. I mean, I saw the pictures and now I'm interacting with them, at the beginning when I get a breakfast, if I get a lunch, and then when I get an afternoon snack. 3 meals a day is great. But I do just have a question. I've heard that meals that aren't served, they're thrown away or tossed out. Is that true? Or can you comment on what happens to meals if they're not served?
So that's not true.
Okay.
We don't throw food away. There are food service laws that exist. So food that has been prepared hot can only be out for a certain amount of time. I cannot give you all of those, all that intricacy. But so if it is a hot prepared meal and it is not served in a certain amount of time, that does have to be disposed of. But when you come in the morning and you grab a bag of breakfast, or on your way out, you grab that bag of dinner and it's not hot prepared food, those that are not picked up can be reused, right? Those are not thrown away. But hot food that is prepared and is not served in a certain amount of time does have to be disposed of.
Wonderful. Thank you. And do you think you could give me that time frame, or the board, the time frame when it has to be disposed? Because
I would have to talk to Miss Reese in Food Nutrition Service to find out what the laws around meal services is.
that's good, because I would appreciate that, because I wouldn't want, especially in tough times like this, food that doesn't have to be thrown away. And from my understanding, what you just said, it's not, which is good. And that's great. And then 2, about the midday break, I'm going to tell you it's all going fine and well in in-person school. Granted, it's only been 4 days for me. But I will tell you, it does get slow around the midday break, because you are kind of just sitting in your community wellness teacher's classroom for that lunch break. And it does get dull after, you've done your clubs, you've done your work, and you've done your homework. There's only so much stuff to talk about. So is there any, I guess, anything in the works for, programming during that time? Not like, I know there's clubs, but for the in-person students, maybe the possibility of going outside.
So that's something I'll encourage you to have a conversation with Dr. Rivers and those students that are listening, to have a conversation with their principals, assistant principals, their SGAs, making suggestions about how to use that time. it is a it is a it is a bit of a tricky time because we're trying to balance having students in the building as well as the timing of the students that are at home. And if you remember, this board and much of the public was very concerned about not losing any of that time for the students that were at home to the students that were in the school building. So we maintain that schedule, which does mean there is a bit of a lull. When you're virtual, that lull, you're at home. And you've got access to your refrigerator and you've got access to the sofa if you want to take a nap, but you don't have that same access at school. And I realize that. But that was part of the trying to make this work. So I would suggest if you've got ideas or you and your classmates have ideas about how to best use that time, I think the principals would be all ears to learn more about what your thoughts are, keeping in mind that we have guidance around distancing that needs to be maintained during that time.
Oh, of course, and I assume the guidance would be the same fall at the elementary school level for recess. You know, what you can and can't do, how close. I mean, I think just a few laps around the track, you know, would do wonders. And you just chit chat with a friend as you know, walk and talk.
Great.
But I think that's great. And then lastly, I just will say that we're talking about, you know, what we're doing now and what we think should continue even after the coronavirus pandemic. And I will say that the one thing that I definitely think that we should, you know, try to maintain is the wiping down of desks or, you know, encouraging students to clean their workspaces. That's just a good habit to have. You know, I hate, you know, coming to a desk following a student who's not the cleanest, you know, kind of messy. Maybe they had a bag of chips and just crumbs everywhere. Maybe some liquid on the desk now to clean up. I think the wiping down the desk is something that is a silver lining or something that we should continue, a positive consequence, I should say, that we should continue doing after this pandemic, just because, especially at the elementary school level, so they'll build off of that going forward because that is a positive. And also our maintenance staff, you know, less work for them. But other than that, you know, so far so good. And I'm really excited.
Shaheen?
Yes, thank you for your update. Thank you to your team, all of your team. Thank you to the teachers. It's just been wonderful. Yes, there are, you know, technical glitches and you know, things to work out as there have been all year, but it's really they've just been so amazing, you know, like the teachers are wonderful and the whole staff has been fabulous, and I just so so grateful. And I get those emails, I've gotten those emails too, of parents just overwhelmed with happiness, and their kids are like there's life in their eyes again. And you know, and I do want to say that, you know, some students, you know, on the other side of the coin, maybe in-person school wasn't their thing before, and they've been thriving this whole year. And so I want to recognize that as well. And that's been, so this last year in some ways been really decent for them too. So yeah, I'm really grateful. I do have a couple questions about summer school. And you know, we talked about this, and we've talked about this before, and I was thrilled to bits. I'm so excited about what's to come for the summer. Can you remind me, does transportation exist for students in the summer, or could it, because of funding sources that weren't available to us in years past?
We are building both transportation and meals into our summer programming.
Wow.
So that's part of the budgeting process that is going through. Dr. McMahon and Mr. Stansky is part of that planning team as well, because he'll be helping us manage this possible $48 million. But yes, that's both transportation and meals. And if it's a program that normally we charge for, like earning credit at the high school level, that'll be paid for by us as well.
Wow, that's incredible. And you know, just to piggyback on what we just voted on, and then you know what we hope for the future, just you know, just I know you don't have like times of day and all of that worked out in the scheduling of that. I just encourage, you know, those start times to line up with what's to come, system-wide someday in the future, before, I think the motion was before January or second semester. I can't remember exactly. So just a nod to that. But yes, all the teachers out there, thank you for everything you're doing. To all the staff, you're fabulous. And someday we'll get some rest from this. And I just, thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to echo a couple things. Absolutely. Thank you to our teachers, and all of the staff. My own freshman got to walk through those doors for the first time. She really enjoys school. She says, I would love to go 4 or 5 days a week. I mean, she really, really enjoys being in the classroom. I know that's only one story, but I had to share it. So it's, I guess, a personal thank you to her teachers for being so welcoming. She's really having a great time. I want to thank Ms. Corkadell for bringing up the mental health conversation. I was able to listen in, and that was a really valuable resource for our community. Thank you all for that. I could not concur more with Mr. Smith's questions and concerns about trying to get students outside. I fully support students making that effort to work with their principals to make that happen. Dr. Arlotto, I just have a couple questions about sort of what's next. So hybrid, we have a lot of families interested in moving into hybrid who did not originally opt for that. And the logistics have become very difficult as staff in the buildings are trying to adjust. So there will be another opportunity down the line when things settle. I guess, can you speak to that at all? That
Absolutely, be glad to. So the next phase, to use that term, is begins on Monday, where we bring in grades 7, 8, 10, and 11. And then we'll give them a week or so to settle. And then the next phase will be going to those, you've heard the term wait lists at schools, but more importantly, as you had said, those parents that now want to make that change from the virtual for their children into the hybrid environment. And so we are putting together a standard process by which parents will have the opportunity to, I'm going to use the term very loosely, apply to do that, complete a form that goes to their school, and then the school can look at the needs of that child in terms of number of students in their class or classes, and if they need bus transportation. So while we are still under the guidance, the 6-foot distancing guidance, we're still limited by how many students we can have on a bus or in a classroom. And so that will be the dictating factor in those areas about how many students can be brought back as those parents apply to say, I want to move my child from the virtual and into the hybrid. For many of our schools, most of our schools, they have room to accept more students. And you've heard me say this on a number of occasions to this board and publicly. Our goal is to bring in as many students that want to return to in-person learning as we can manage, given the current guidelines, the distancing guidelines that exist in classroom, schools, and on buses. So that's the next phase, is after we get grades 7, 8, 10, and 11 in, then we'll start to bring in those families that want to come into the hybrid environment. I would suspect that the next piece of that, the next phase, will be a relaxation of the distancing guidance that is out there. That's much talked in the news. It's not new to any of you about moving from that 6 feet to something less. Whatever that something less is, we're preparing to be able to bring that many more students, whatever that number will be. We're prepared to bring that many more students into the hybrid environment. And so that's the plan moving forward.
And if we get to that point, hopefully sooner than later, where we can bring students in for, say, 4 days a week, a question I'm getting from some parents is, will 2 days still be an option if we get to that point? So in other words, does opting into hybrid, or no, does opting in to the classroom, does hybrid remain an option?
So going 4 days a week is not going to be the primary part of our plan moving forward, right? We all want to get to that.
Right.
What we want to get to is 5 days a week and everything's back to normal.
Right.
We're not there yet. So the next phase is as those, and I believe will be the case sometime this spring, those distancing guidelines will begin to be reduced. When we get that guidance from the health experts, our goal is, again, I want to go back to my goal, which is bring as many students back into the school building as want to, given the guidelines at that time. If we go to 4 days a week, if the distancing guidelines are reduced, and our goal is to go 4 days a week, we won't increase the number of students in the building, because you'll basically be taking the Monday, Tuesday cohort and combine it with the Thursday, Friday cohort. And those kids are now going 2 days a week. They'll go 4 days a week. And you haven't left any room for the students that want to come from virtual back into the building. So we don't achieve our goal, which is increase the number of students at least 2 days a week. So the next phase would be to increase the number of students that are in one of the two cohorts. We want to fill those up. We have some schools that are only going 2 days a week. I want to make sure they're going 4 days a week, a Monday, Tuesday cohort and a Thursday, Friday cohort. That's the goal. And then if we get to a point that everything is relaxed and we can get to 4 days a week, that could be a possibility. But I would suspect, and my crystal ball is very fuzzy these days over the past year. I'm not very good at predicting, but I think that if we can increase the number of students in our cohorts 2 days a week, that's probably how we'll finish out the year. That would be my guess.
Is that, so your column this week that printed talked about 4 days a week?
Yep, it sure did, right? And that's still a goal, right? If we can get to that without limiting the number of students that do want to return. I don't want to say no to the family that says we were virtual and we'd like to come back at least 2 days a week. Because if again, based on whatever the guidance is at that time, next week or a month from now, I don't want to have to say families, sorry, you're going to have to remain virtual because the students that started hybrid first get to remain, and I'm going to let them go more days a week and you don't get to go any.
Right.
And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's equitable.
Yeah,
So that's the thing. So is the goal, absolutely, if we could get to that point, I don't know that we're going to get to that point. I think time may run out by the end of this year that we don't get to that point, but it's absolutely a goal. And that's not new. What I wrote in that column is I've said publicly to this group, to this board, and I've said a number of times publicly that, sure, we want to get back to getting as many students back in the building. And if we could do that 4 days a week, even better. But I don't want to do it at the cost of saying no to students and families that do want to return.
Right, of course. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And finally, item 7.02, monthly financial status report and fiscal year 21 revenue and expenditure projections. Dr. Arlato?
You have, these are documents that you have seen before, and
Okay.
Mr. Sheknovich is here to answer any
Answer
questions that you may have.
Anyone? Yep.
Sorry, just one really tiny question. I noticed when I was looking that our food expenditures are down for the year relative to the previous year. And I was just curious about, was that CARES money or how did that work?
Sure. For the record, Alex Shekno, Chief Operating Officer. I believe you're looking at likely the first page of the exhibit.
Yeah.
So approximately 2 years ago, we received supplemental funding from the county when they enacted a local law legislation here that requires organic-based food trays.
Oh.
They essentially banned styrofoam. And so what the county government did, recognizing that the organic trays costed more than what we were previously using, they provided us funding for that. And you'll see it's a very small amount, Dr. Tobin. It's $483,000. So because of the modality that we have been serving up to now, mostly, right? It's been, as Dr. Lotto said, plastic bags, grab and go, a lot of prepackaged things. We've not been using as many of the trays, but now that we've returned to school, we are going to see a more utilization.
Great, that makes
Yes,
sense.
ma'am,
I mean,
absolutely.
that was just not a number I expected to see slightly down. So thank you very much.
Reminded me that I had a question about the community services. That was a huge difference. Is that somehow COVID related?
So again, if you notice, it's in our $1.3 billion budget, that line item is $121,000. So a lot of those, it's not that there's been a curtailment of the community services. We've actually been very fortunate in that some of the federal monies that we've received really have been tailored towards the community services, the wraparound services, a lot of those type of things. And as we've been applying for the grants and standing up those systems, we have been leaning a little bit more heavily on the grant funding. This is an area, honestly, that there's a tremendous amount of need in. And we've been a little bit of cautious. We're kind of, I won't say holding this in reserve a little bit, but we know we're going to need it. But we want to try to use some of the CARES money to do some of the big heavy lifts in this area, knowing that we still have this kind of for the home stretch run.
That's what I was hoping your answer would be. Thank you. Great. Anyone else? All right. Thank you very much. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, April 7th, 10 a.m. here in the boardroom. Policy Committee will meet April 6th, Budget Committee April 20th. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten, we don't have it on here yet, but the Equity Committee will be meeting next month, April 14th. 16th. Oh, April 14th at 6 p.m. The Equity Committee. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?